It's not mine. Yeah. She was thinking it was going to be Zoom instead.
No, we don't have the camera.
That's what I thought. Not in here.
I've got the screen. I'll do this stuff.
Yep, I can't do that. I got it. Yep.
I feel good.
I got to sit off on it because this is too far now. No, you go ahead. You need to be comfortable. You're writing. So he brought this.
Yeah, so it's just some background for that. So, no, we'll
If everyone would please take their seats, we're going to get started in our meeting. Thank you.
She has no choice.
Sure. Okay.
No choice. There's too many papers, boy.
Hey, good to see you. Very good. Thank you.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Everyone, please take your seats. We're going to get started with our meeting. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. I also like to welcome everyone that's here in our council chambers and everyone that's listening at WCBU. Also, those that are watching on Channel 22. Madam Clerk, the council mics are open. Please call the roll.
Lee. Councilmember Allen.
Present.
Councilmember Sear. Here. Councilmember Gordon Young. Councilmember Graham.
Here.
Councilmember Jackson. Here. Member Kelly.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach. Councilmember Velpula.
Present.
Councilmember Vespa.
Here.
A notice was received by Councilmember Euler of the City Council in accordance with the rules established in Ordinance Number 16142. Councilmember Euler would be deemed authorized to attend the meeting electronically unless a motion objecting to Councilmember Euler's electronic attendance is made, seconded, and approved by two-thirds of the members of the City Council physically present at the meeting. If no such motion is made and seconded, then the request by Councilmember Euler to attend electronically shall be deemed and approved by the City Council, and the presiding officer shall declare Councilmember Euler present. Hearing no objection, Madam Clerk, can you call?
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. All right, Madam Clerk.
We are at proclamations.
We have two proclamations. Not sure I have them yet. Let's see. There they are.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor. We got to do the Pledge
hearings.
of Allegiance.
Pardon me?
The Pledge of Allegiance and the
Oh, thank
invocation.
you. Thank you. Everyone, please join me and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Now we're at proclamations.
Okay, thank you very much. We have two proclamations. The first acknowledges Community Foundation Week, and we have Mark Roberts, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Community Foundation of Central Illinois, and Andrea Ingerson. She's the Director of Communications of the Community Foundation of Central Illinois. Welcome. Is Andrea also here?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I'll read the proclamation. Whereas community members, neighborhoods, institutions, and organizations in the city of Peoria have historically benefited from the ongoing generosity of donations from families, businesses, and community foundations. And whereas the Community Foundation of Central Illinois, CFCI, has granted over $91 million in grants to nonprofit organizations since its inception in 1985. Whereas one of the most significant ways to ensure a strong community, economic vitality, and educational success is through the active presence of a community foundation. In the 2023 fiscal year, thanks to the generosity of donors, CFCI distributed 2008 grants totaling $7,448,654 with a heightened focus on ending hunger, equipping and developing a strong workforce, and fostering the local arts community. Whereas CFCI has numerous funds and initiatives, including the Women's Fund of Central Illinois, which recently reached a $1 million endowment, ensuring the continued support of programs for women and girls in perpetuity. And whereas our community is fortunate to have the Community Foundation of Central Illinois as a resource for collective giving. Their dedicated staff and volunteers work tirelessly every day to inspire philanthropy, improve the quality of life, strengthen nonprofits, foster collaboration, and provide leadership in Central Illinois. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, and on behalf of the Peoria City Council, do hereby acknowledge November 12th through November 18th as Community Foundation Week in Peoria, Illinois. Mr. Roberts.
Thank you, Mayor Ali, and
Thank
thank
you.
you, council members. And on behalf of the Board of Directors, all the volunteers, the staff, and the fund holders of the Community Foundation of Central Illinois, I thank you, and it's my honor to accept this proclamation on National Community Foundation Week. Across our country, community foundations help connect people who care with causes that matter and work to build strong, vibrant communities. In mid-November, we will celebrate the vital role of more than 900 community foundations across the United States that are supporting essential services in this community and in theirs, including healthcare, food banks, domestic violence shelters, libraries, volunteer fire departments, and much, much more. As the mayor just mentioned, in 2022, these foundations granted approximately $30 billion to a wide variety of nonprofit programs, including, as we do, the arts, education, health and human services, the environment, disaster relief, and again, much, much more. Locally, as the mayor also noted a few moments ago, the Community Foundation of Central Illinois granted over $7 million back into our community last year and have granted over $91 million since our inception nearly 38 years ago. We are growing rapidly. We are now the 5th largest community foundation in the state of Illinois by asset size, and we are the largest downstate, south of the suburbs. We are making an increasingly significant impact on the greater central Illinois area through very innovative grant-making programs that are addressing food insecurity, workforce readiness, issues impacting women and girls, the arts, hundreds of thousands of dollars of scholarships each year to local students, and again, so much more. Again, with our generous donors, fund holders, and volunteers, we are proud to play an active role in supporting the quality of life in this community. Community foundations know that by marshaling the financial resources of individuals, families, businesses, and others, we can collectively address critical community issues together. And by strategically working with so many others, which is what we do, it's about partnerships and collaboration throughout Central Illinois, we are helping to pave the way towards an ever-improving quality of life in this community. And we thank you for this recognition of Community Foundation Week 2023. Thank you, Mayor.
Welcome. And I want to say, I'm going to date myself and say, I remember when you first opened, the Community Foundation of Central Illinois first opened 38 years ago, and your leadership come in and taking it to a new level. So thank you for making a huge difference with your awesome leadership here in Peoria. Thank you.
Kind of you, Mayor. Thank you.
Our second proclamation recognizes National Latino Physician Day, and we have Karina Favela, a resident of Peoria and a third-year medical student at the University of Illinois College of Medicine. Also, Dr. Elsa L. Vasquez Melendez, faculty advisor for the Latino Medical Student Association, LMSA. That chapter is in Peoria. Welcome, ladies. Whereas the city of Peoria takes great pride in recognizing the significant contributions made by Latino physicians to our community's health care and well-being, and whereas National Latino Physician Day, observed on October 1st, is a day designated to honor and celebrate the accomplishments, dedication, and tireless commitment of Latino physicians to the field of medicine. And whereas Latino physicians have played an instrumental role in addressing healthcare disparities, providing culturally competent care, and advancing medical research and education, contributing immensely to the betterment of our city. And whereas these dedicated professionals have been on the front lines during the COVID-19 pandemic, demonstrating unwavering resilience and compassion in the face of adversity. And whereas the city of Peoria wishes to express its heartfelt gratitude to Latino physicians for their exceptional service to our community and their unwavering commitment to the health and well-being of all residents and in promoting diversity and inclusivity within our healthcare system. Now, therefore, I, Rita Ali, Mayor of the City of Peoria, Illinois, do hereby acknowledge October 1st as National Latino Physician Day in Peoria. Karina or Dr. Melendez?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, everybody, for the proclamation. It is very important for us to be recognized. I've been in Peoria for almost 20 years, and I've been the only Latino physician for a very long time. And we're working diligently to recruit medical students and residents to increase the workforce for Latino physicians to address the needs of our community. So I'm very thankful for this proclamation. And I also want Karina to say a few words too.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say, as a third-year medical student, I think it's really important to increase the amount of diversity that we see in the workforce, especially as the Hispanic population grows in the United States. Currently, there are only 6% of active Latino physicians here in the U.S., with a population of about 20% of Latinos overall. For the language and cultural competency of providing adequate medical care, I think it's essential that we increase these number of medical students and that we increase the availability of medical care to those with all languages and all cultures. Thank you.
And we concur. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk?
We're at approval of the minutes.
Councilman Riggenbach?
Just a minute. I seem to have lost that page. I move to approve the regular City Council and Town Board meeting held on October 10th, 2023 as printed.
Seconded by Councilmember Gordon Young. Any comments, questions? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at public hearings.
Okay.
Item number 23-344, a public hearing regarding the proposed West Lamont Avenue Special Service Area.
Thank you. This public hearing regarding the proposed West Lamont Avenue Special Service Area is being held pursuant to Chapter 35 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes, Section 200/27. Public notice was published in the Peoria Journal-Star on October 9th, 2023. I would request a motion from council to open the public hearing. Moved by Councilmember Jackson, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler,
Aye.
a motion passes unanimously. Council Hayes.
Madam Mayor.
And Council Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The Illinois Compiled Statutes requires this hearing on the city's ordinance proposing the establishment of a special service area. The City Council passed that ordinance number 18103, on September 26th, which proposed a special service area and established tonight's hearing. This hearing sets off a 60-day period during which objectors to the proposal may file a petition with the city that may negate the opportunity to move forward with the special service area. That requires 51% of the electors residing within the area, as well as 51% of the property owners, to file that petition with the city clerk. If the city clerk does not receive such a petition within those 60 days, the council would be presented with an opportunity to move forward with the special service area at the first meeting in January. Otherwise, if a valid petition is filed with the clerk, a special service area cannot proceed for a minimum of 2 years from that date. The special service area will address infrastructure needs in that neighborhood. The resident participation will be limited to 80% of the cost of a mill and overlay of the street, and the city's contribution will include 20% of the cost of the mill and overlay, as well as the cost of curb and gutter replacement as a stormwater improvement. That's in recognition of previous expectations of participation in the sidewalk participation program, as well as the conditions of the curb and gutter. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to respond to the council on those, but otherwise we can proceed with the public portion of the public hearing. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, council. If there are any individuals that wish to provide comment, please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and provide your comments. Again, if there are any individuals that would like to provide comment, please come now to the podium and state your name for the record and provide your comments. Again, this is the public hearing regarding the proposed Lamont Avenue Special Service Area. If there are any individuals that wish to provide comment, please approach the podium, state your name for the record, and provide your comments. I would request a motion to close the public hearing, moved by Councilmember Allen, seconded by Councilmember Greb. Discussion, please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
Item number 23-345, a public hearing regarding the First Amendment to the annexation agreement for 12025 North Clowing Road.
Okay. Council, were you going to speak to this one as well?
We can defer that to when we are taking up the annexation matter.
Okay.
Just see if there's any public hearing or
Okay.
public comments for this.
All right. Can I get a motion to open? Moved by Councilmember Sear, seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Do we have anyone here that wants to speak to the public hearing regarding the First Amendment to the annexation agreement for 12025 North Klein Road? Again, is there anyone present that would like to speak to the public hearing regarding the First Amendment to the annexation agreement for 12025 North Klein Road? Then last call, is there anyone who would like to speak to the public hearing regarding the First Amendment to the annexation agreement for 12025 North Klein Road? I would request a motion to close the public hearing, moved by Councilmember Sears, seconded by Councilmember Gordon Young. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
We are at consent agenda items. Item number 23-346, a communication with the request to approve and authorize the payment of a workers' compensation settlement to a police officer injured on January 17th, 2022, in the amount of $100,000. 23-347, a communication with the request to approve an incumbency certificate and resolution accepting a grant from the IDA for the Strong Communities Program, Round 2, in the amount of $712,000. 23-348, a communication with the request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in the Class R2 Single Family Residential District for a short-term rental for the property located at 615 West Timothy Drive. 23-349, a communication with the request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in the Class R3 Single Family Residential District for a short-term rental for the property located at 5054-5056 North Lakeside Place. 23-350, an appointment to the Transportation Commission with the request to concur, Ashwini Gokul. 23-351, an appointment to the Mayor's Advisory Committee for Citizens with Disabilities with a request to concur, for Molly Hodgeboom. 23-352, an appointment to the Zoning Board of Appeals with the request to concur, for Patricia Morrison Dennis. That concludes our consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any items to remove from consent? Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 22-348, please.
Thank you. Any other items? I get a motion to approve of the consent agenda, moved by Councilmember Riggenbach, seconded by Councilmember Jackson. Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk?
Item number 23-348, a communication with the request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in the Class R2 Single Family Residential District for a short-term rental for the property located at 615 West Timothy Drive.
Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to defer until November 21st meeting, a month from now, so we can communicate with the staff, please.
Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Any other discussion? Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk? Oh, pardon me. Manager?
November 21st is Thanksgiving week. It's not likely we'll have a meeting on that date. So the 28th would be the next regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council, if that would be okay for the...
Modify that motion.
Yes, Madam Mayor. Let's defer until November 28th of 2023 per the city manager's recommendation.
Okay, council, do we need to actually take that vote again? Or? Okay, thank you. We're good. We're all good. Thank you. Madam Clerk?
We are at regular business. Item number 23-353, a communication with the request to approve an agreement with the Peoria City County Health Department for the Flexible Housing Rental Assistance Program in the amount of $936,134.31.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is an item that is coming forward. As you know, through the American Rescue Plan, we created a public health equity fund to work with the City County Health Department and the County of Peoria. And I'm going to turn the floor over to Director Doolin to talk about this exciting program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, Manager. So this program, as the manager said, is through the money that was originally sent to the health department to look at social equity issues in our community. After much discussion, we decided to talk about housing issues and met with Kate Green, who is with us today, the Executive Director of the Home for All Continuum of Care, Monica Hendrickson, and city staff to talk about how we can best use some of these funds to really address some housing issues in our community. One of the things we've noticed and identified and known for a significant amount of time is a problem of homelessness in our community, and specifically how resources are allocated based on your needs as someone who's experiencing homelessness. So there's a coordinated intake list that exists in our community. So when you call 211 and you get in touch with Salvation Army, Dream Center, Phoenix Community Development Services, you go on that list. And then often resources are available based on where you fall on that list. That list is created based on those who need the most assistance, but often those who need the most assistance are the hardest to actually house in our community. When looking through that list, you see people who are there who have income, but don't necessarily have the additional funds to get off the list and not experiencing homelessness due to a multitude of different factors, whether it's not having the upfront money to do a security deposit or the first and last month rent, or not having money to pay an old Ameren bill, so you can't get utilities in your name, so you can't get someone to rent to you. And those are the people who are often usually in the middle towards the end of the list, because they do have an income, they do have employment, but because they don't have that kind of substantial capital up front, they can't be housed. So what this program will do is allow for city staff to really focus on those that with just a little resources and a little extra help, we can get them off the coordinated intake list and actually into permanent housing. So I just want to thank Kate Green and all of our nonprofit partners for helping us come up with this program. Really thank staff for their work on it. I think it's a very innovative new solution, and I think if you add this to the other affordable housing that's being created in our community, Phoenix Community Development Services upcoming project next year, I think we'll still continue to see some substantial movement with our homeless population and actually providing housing, which is the key to actually making an impact of homelessness in our community. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
I just want to applaud the collaboration. Ms. Kate Green, we appreciate all the great work that you're doing in supporting the needs of homeless in our community and through the continuum of care. Any questions or comments, Council? Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Doolin, this is a great program. I'm 100% behind this program. But I just got a question, which I always have the same question when it comes to taxpayers' money. I mean, 25% of this money, it's going to go to administration, software, things like that. I mean, there's a duplication of software or people, administrators that could save some money and put that $1,000 to work for our people that need it the most instead of for administration costs, basically. I just love to see us being leaner and have more money going to them than administration. Just a question.
Yeah, I mean, I think traditionally with programs like this, I mean, part of it when you see that administration cost, I mean, it's substantial human administration that's needed for cases like this. I mean, the case management alone is going to require a multitude of about an employee and a half with salary benefits and then with sophomores. So I understand your point. We will make sure that if there is any software that we can utilize that we already have, we'll continue to use to reduce that amount. But with these, to have a successful program, you're going to need substantial case management of all the people that are going through this program, and a lot of that cost will go specifically for that. But yes, I absolutely agree with you. We will look to make sure that if there is opportunities to save on that, we will.
Last question. Can the township help us out with these programs? When I look at expenses that include utility bills and things like that, I mean, that's what they do. Can they help us keep costs down, basically?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any opportunity we have with the township or referring people to their programs, I mean, I think the good thing that we have in our community is the 211 service, where if you call, they know all the programs that exist. Because even if you call Ameren or American Water, they have usually utility forgiveness programs. If you call PCCO as an action agency, and it's a lot to navigate as a resident. So we will make sure to utilize all those programs first. When we're talking about utility assistance, that's going to really be trying to get someone's, if they owe $600 for a past Ameren bill and so they can't get their Ameren turned on, that's where that's going to help with. Or if they're moving into a place and they need that security deposit for Illinois American Water to come out and turn your water on, that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about utility assistance, not kind of the ongoing supplemental cost per se.
Thank you, sir. Madam Mayor, move to approve.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Velpula. Continued discussion, Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Director Doolin. Just two clarifying questions. The first question, is there an estimated amount of citizens you plan to help with this grant?
Yes. We hope to be able, through this money, to help about 60 households.
Awesome. And then secondly, because it's coming from the American Rescue Plan Act, do they need to find housing in qualified census tracts, or will they be able to find housing throughout the city?
Throughout the city.
Awesome. Great. Well, no, this is a great program, and it's great to hear especially that it's going to help those who may just need a hand up as they are looking to improve and they're doing the right things. They just need additional assistance. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
I think that's an opportunity. One of the parts of the program, and if you talk to our nonprofit providers, service providers in our community, is getting landlords interested and willing to provide that housing. Sometimes it's a little more riskier investment because people don't have the long history and a high credit score and all those things. So within the program, too, there's money built in to incentivize landlords to want to participate. But if there's anyone listening now who would like to participate and has housing available and would like to work with us or any of our continuum of care providers, please reach out to our department at 494-8600. We're always looking for landlords who own property in Peoria who take care of their property and are willing to work with us.
Councilmember Gordon-Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to everyone that was involved in this. This is absolutely wonderful and much needed in this community. I do have a question because there are so many people that struggle with housing who have a felony conviction. Are felonies or any previous, are there any disqualifiers that we should be aware of?
No.
Okay.
I think we're going to take a look at the list and really identify those that are employed and have income and that just need that additional help. And all the other barriers we'll work to overcome.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Director Doolin, great job in coordinating and putting this program together. And Director Green in the background there, thank you for your leadership on all of these many issues with the continuum of care. Just to wrap our arms around what we're talking about, with the end result being housing for 60 families, reading the communication, last year there were 1,500 people that sought assistance. Am I reading that right? And now the list is down to 415 households, or help me work through that funnel, if you will.
I'll ask Kate Green, come up here to field that. I think those are probably the people that called, and then the 450 are actually people enrolled in the list, but I will let her talk about that.
Challenged, so let me bring that down just a touch. Thank you, Councilman Riggenbach, for that question. So the 1,500 number is really the number of individuals that we see on an annual calendar basis. So from January to December, we're seeing that many of unique individuals. And then at any given time, so right now we have over 400 households who are waiting on our coordinated list to access those permanent housing resources. So we might see some of those folks exit, some might remain, but that's typically the number that we float around, is a little around 400 households at any given time that are seeking permanent housing assistance.
So what other programming is available for those 400 people? 60, that's a great number to champion, and we're thrilled to see that, but there's still a big need there. So what other resources are available to those folks?
Absolutely. So we go through an annual competition through the Department of Housing and Urban Development for funding for permanent housing resources, whether that be permanent housing that lasts forever and can go with somebody because they have a disabling condition, they're chronically homeless. That's somebody that we might be able to assist with case management and rent assistance indefinitely. We also have rapid rehousing, which is up to 2 years of assistance for a bit lower vulnerability folks who we hope can then transition to stable housing on their own. Between those two interventions, last year we served about 10% of our list. That leaves 90% that's still trying to seek other housing opportunities. So we continue to cultivate partnerships with housing authorities, income-based units, opportunities like this. We're so grateful for the partnership with the city and the county to help expand that pool of resources, because we have an ongoing list of folks because we don't have access to enough resources. So always trying to grow that pool.
Great, thank you very much. And I would just ask my colleagues to make sure that you put a little pin in this topic, because we talk a lot about affordable housing and the resources that we're allocating for that cause, and that's a key part of our strategic plan, which we'll be discussing later. But let's make sure that we take the opportunity to actually put the dollars to work that will address those issues, and not just have it be a nice sentence on the wall on a plan. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Very welcome. We have a motion on the floor to approve. If there's no other discussion, please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Director, and thank you, Director Green. Madam Clerk?
Item number 23-354, a communication with the request to approve the sole source professional service agreement with Taylor Built Solutions to complete a database cleanup of ADSI records for the City of Peoria in preparation for the CAD RMS project in the amount not to exceed $37,500. This requires a 2/3 vote of the council members voting, no less than 6 votes.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. With this, we have our IS Director, Jessica McKeon, and I'm going to ask her to take over the floor and talk about this item.
Hello, everyone. So basically what we're trying to do is we tried to do an internal process of cleaning up about 6 million records, and we've got through maybe 100,000 in 6 months. So this would bring in the developers of the software to clean up RMS, which is the record management system for the police department, clean up their records in with developers who created the software.
And because this is, it's a sole source contract, it requires the 2/3 vote of the City Council.
Understood. Questions from the council? Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sorry, what is your name again?
Jessica McKean.
Ms. McKean, could you explain to us what sort of things need to be cleaned up? I'm not opposing this or whatever, but I don't quite understand how we would have, how many records?
Thereabouts. So this is decades of records. The city has used ADSI, which is the RMS product for PD, where they type in the reports and things like that. And for an example would be maybe there's McDonald's on Knoxville. If they just searched in there trying to write the report and they couldn't find McDonald's on Knoxville, they might add another McDonald's entry into the software. So now there's 15 of the same McDonald's in there, and we need to consolidate them into one instance without losing any information. And the same with people. So maybe they put me in as Jessica McKean, and they put Jessica with a different spelling, but I'm the same name and I have the same birth date and the same other identifiers. We want to consolidate if I have multiple records into one record without losing any information. So that's what this would do.
That's kind of what I thought, and thank you for that. That was much clearer than the way I would have put it, but that was quite clear. Thank you. I don't doubt that what you're doing has great value and that it's a difficult job. I just let's talk about today. What safeguards do we have that hopefully disallow
Yes, I can answer that.
this kind of stuff?
So we're preparing to get a new CAD RMS, which is going to have preventative measures so this stops happening. So we're trying to clean it up so that when we move to the next software, we're not paying the next vendor a whole lot of money to migrate bad data or duplication of data. This is the current vendor reducing the amount of data we have because of duplicate records, so that when we move to the new product, which we're in the process of selecting, when we go to that, they have measures in more modern software that prevent this from occurring in the first place.
Okay, so I guess this is framed as a vendor problem. Of course, it's an input problem, but the software doesn't help in the creation of a poor record.
Yes,
And
yeah.
our new software is just going to be so great that this isn't going to happen anymore, right?
Yes.
Oh,
we are looking forward to
Don't
the
say
new
yes,
software.
say I think so.
Yes, it is. It was one of our number one priorities when we pick the next software.
I understand it would be a priority, but
Requirement, I should say.
yeah. Well, I don't know what to say. Good luck. Good luck. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Gordon Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually very familiar with the ADSI system and understand how we got here, but I also agree with the question of how do we avoid this happening in the future. So do you know, and maybe you answered this, but like who that new company or what that new system, has that been confirmed, like who we're going with?
We have we went through our first round of selection, so we're down to 3 CAD RMS vendors and 2 fire RMS vendors. We are going to interview current customers in the next couple months, and then January we will have demos of the 2 or 3 that we've selected. Then we will go through another round of selecting the top 1 or 2 and then move on. So we're hoping to have our vendor selected in the spring. And we've been going through this process for about like 10 months.
Understandable. Thank you for all you do.
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay, if there's no more questions, we need a motion to approve, moved by Councilmember Allen, seconded by Councilmember Gordon Young. Please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk? Thank you. Director McKean?
Item number 23-355, a communication with a request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to approve a resolution approving the First Amendment to the annexation agreement, including a subdivision plat for the property located south of Cedar Hills Drive, north of parcel identification number 08-24-400-002, west of Allen Road, and east of parcel identification number 08-24-100-005, identified as parcel identification numbers 08-24-200-003, 08-24-400-001, and 09-19-100-002, Peoria County, Illinois. And this requires a 2/3 vote of the corporate authorities and 8 votes.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to ask our Assistant Community Development Director, Lee Allison, to come up and explain this annexation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. So this goes back to an original annexation agreement approved in 2007 for 3 large tract parcels that in 2007 were not contiguous to the city of Peoria's limits, and fast forward to today, are still not contiguous to the city's limits. So we're just talking about an agreement, and the ask before you today is to amend that agreement to allow a couple things to happen. The first is to divide one of the large tract parcels into 2 lots, we'll call them. One is about 22 acres, and the second lot is about 58 acres. The other component of the proposed amendment is to allow one of the new lots, the 22-acre, to be developed with a single-family residence. And then the third part of that ask is to allow that residence, that new dwelling, to be developed and constructed without connection to sanitary sewer, to public sanitary sewer and water. So that's the 3 components of the proposed First Amendment to that annexation agreement, and if approved by you, would allow the subdivision, the development of one house, without connection to sanitary sewer and water. So it would be on a septic and a well. Can I answer any questions with that?
Thank you, Director. Councilman Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Move to approve the request from the staff.
Seconded by Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Assistant Director, how far are they from water and sewer, city water and sewer?
The first answer to your question with the sewer is it's an area that is challenging for any infrastructure improvements involving sewer. It's a factor of location, topography, and then with our current sewer system, capacity. So it's just it will be a big hurdle to achieve. In my opinion, it'll probably take more of just one developer, maybe a partnership of developers, but it's not an easy task for that area at the moment.
And water?
Water, I don't know exactly the details of.
My interest is most about proximity to existing utilities.
I know that there are other water district adjacent or nearby that perhaps if the developer were to pursue and investigate, there may be an opportunity. My understanding is that it is a significant distance in cost and hence the well is their preferred route to take.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about future development, and but I think is what you're saying is first of all, the proximity is not, they're not very proximate. Is that correct? That's the main thing I was after.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. We have a motion and a second. Approve this item. Please cast your ballots. Member Euler?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Assistant Director Allison. Madam Clerk.
Item number 23-356, a communication with a request to approve a resolution to purchase the waterworks. And there's multiple handouts on your desk, a slide presentation, a report back from Woodard and Curran, and a letter from Public Works Director Rick Powers.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'm going to start by inviting comments from Ms. Rebecca Losley. She's the president of Illinois American Water Company. I think with her also is Mr. Kyle Smith. He's the senior operations manager of the Western Division for Illinois American Water. And then after we hear from them, I'm going to turn it over to our city manager. So thank you and welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, members of staff. Thank you for inviting us to come and speak tonight before this important vote. My name is Rebecca Losley. I'm the president of Illinois American Water. With me tonight are members of our Illinois American Water team, including, I just want to spotlight Kyle Smith, our senior manager for the Peoria district. So Kyle's there in the red sweater. Before I begin, I observed and our team observed 2 weeks ago the discussion and the presentation for Woodard and Curran. We did submit a letter to the mayor and city council on October 18th to address and try to clarify a few. And I wanted to make sure that that was either included in the packet or at least something that the group had made aware. And if I wasn't sure if it should be a part of the proceeding.
They haven't. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So to begin, I'd like to talk about the partnership between the city of Peoria and Illinois American Water. So for the last 133 years, American Water, Illinois American Water, has provided safe, clean, reliable service to the city of Peoria. We have over 80 employees here in this district, and providing water services, clean, safe, reliable, is all we do. We do it 24/7. And, I wasn't planning on including this in my remarks, but listening to the previous order of business, one of the things we take very seriously at American Water is cybersecurity. And so with American Water, I heard a lot of discussion 2 weeks ago about economies of scale, and that's true. We have buying power when it comes to pipe, when it comes to chemicals, but we also offer expertise in water quality and cybersecurity, which is a big deal. Water is the only utility that we ingest. And we take it very seriously at Illinois American Water, and we have the backing of American Water to be sure that we are as protected as possible. In fact, I go to utility conferences, and American Water information technology folks are on panels, national panels, talking about cybersecurity. And recently we went to Illinois EPA, and we were talking about water quality issues in this state. And so American Water serves 148 communities across this state. Peoria is very important to us, and we take it very seriously serving you as your utility. And that is water quality, it's cybersecurity, it's 24/7, and it's 80 employees right here in your town. We are regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission. I would say I hope all of you know Kyle Smith, because if you have a problem with Illinois American Water, he's your local person to call. Of course, my door is open. I'm happy to give you a card at the end of this meeting, but Kyle's your local leader here in your town and lives here in this community. One of the things that I think gets not talked about a lot, but I think American Water does very well, is coordination with other utilities. And the reason that matters is that when I talk with the president of Ameren, ComEd, NICOR, Peoples Gas, all these utilities are facing rate increases, as we do as well. And one of the things that we want to do is be as cost effective as we can on delivering capital. And one of the ways that we do that is better coordination between the utilities. And I understand that Illinois American Water team came and spoke a few weeks back about lead and our coordination on the lead program and all the lead lines that we have replaced. And one of the things that we take very seriously is making sure if we're going to have construction that's very disruptive, that we only do it once if we can, and that we're talking with the sewer department here within the city to say, hey, is there any way that we can coordinate these types of projects? So I'd like to highlight that because I think sometimes it's not recognized until it's really done poorly, but that's something that we take very importantly. So I'd like to talk a little bit about capital. Since 2003, Illinois American Water has invested $318 million in Peoria. That meant over 90 miles of water main, over 5,000 lead lines have been replaced over that 20-year period. We relocate water mains whenever there's development, whenever there's, I understand there was an Interstate 74 improvement project where we had to do a significant water main relocation. We're doing significant investments at the plant to make sure that the community of Peoria has safe and reliable water 24/7. The investments are significant. When it comes to capital at American Water and we're doing our planning, we look over a 10-year horizon and we say, okay, what do we think we're going to have to invest in all of these communities and what's that going to look like from a capital standpoint? But I'll tell you, we already have built out the next 5 years for capital spend, so that's 24 through 29. And we have identified over $200 million in projects just for Peoria in the next 5 years. And so what does that look like? That's going to be more lead service line replacements. We estimate that we're going to need to replace approximately 9,000 additional lead service lines in Peoria. It's going to mean 24 miles of additional water line replacements. One of the things that we're doing in the state of Illinois is moving from gas disinfection, so we use chlorine gas for disinfection of our water, moving from chlorine to liquid, moving from gas to liquid. Because it's safer, and we think it's the right thing to be doing for our utility. So we are making some investments to do that transition. And then we're also, I mentioned we recently met with Illinois EPA, looking at regulations that are coming and making sure that we have planned ahead, that we'll have the capital and we have a plan in place to be able to meet all those regulations on time for our customers. The one thing I do want to highlight, and actually some of the previous items also brought to mind to be sure to say this, is our customer assistance programs. So we do have a customer assistance program. I understand, and I saw it was part of the presentation on lead previously, but that is a program that we'd like to spotlight for customers, that they can participate and obtain up to 70% of their water usage bill taken off. And it's income-based, and they would need to qualify, but I want to make sure that the customers in Peoria are aware of those types of programs. So reading the city manager's memo, just emphasizing the vote tonight isn't about due diligence. It's about if you want to buy the system. And we are really proud to be your water provider in this community. I am hopeful that you have that trust in us and want us to continue doing that. But I appreciate the opportunity to get to make a few comments. Happy to answer questions. I believe that we're going to do that later, so I will leave it there.
Thank you, Ms. Losley. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to put up a slide deck. We sent copies of that out to everyone today. There we go. Okay. And then Morgan and Jim are going to come up a little bit later. But first, I wanted to talk about the purchase option itself and what that calls for. This is the language out of the 1904 franchise agreement. We have to pass a resolution 6 months prior to the anniversary date of the adoption of that franchise agreement in order to say that the City Council desires to purchase the waterworks, and then from that point, the valuation process starts. And the process and rules by which we have to follow that is that we have to pass the resolution, and then we sit down with the water company and we talk about a price. If we can't agree on a price, then we form a commission that will do the appraisal process and that valuation process. That commission is designed to determine the fair market value, and they have a set number of days to determine whether or not the city then has a set number of days after that valuation process to determine whether or not to purchase the water company. So there are, within that, the rules of order of the commission. This is the last time we negotiated this, which would have been in 2003. It took almost 8 months and considerable cost to negotiate the rules of order, and it deals with the amendments that may be made by the commission and how they might change the process, who the commissioners are and how they're being selected. It'll lay out what are the issues to be determined, when are the meetings, how are they handling confidential information. But one of the things that they're required to do is hold an evidentiary hearing, and that hearing is to be 9 months after the adoption of these rules. So if you think about that, if it took 8 months the last time, and let's say it takes 3 months this time, and then they have 9 months to set a hearing, you're a year out from the time that you actually have this process taking before we would even start that evidentiary process. In addition, there's going to be discovery. There's going to be experts that we're going to have to hire, whether that's appraisers, financial experts, legal experts, engineering experts, all of those types of people that we would hire to submit expert testimony to the water company to ensure or to the commission to ensure that information is put on record so that the commissioners can make their best decision. Following that hearing, then they have 45 days in which to make an award. After that 45 days, the city has 60 days to determine if they want to purchase it at that point in time. If at any point in time if the city decides to stop the process, we have to reimburse Illinois American for their expenses. Lastly, after the award has been given, there's a 6-month due diligence period that starts. It's the standard due diligence when we actually get to look at the books to verify what Rebecca said, that there's $200 million of capital expenses that are planned for the next 5 years. That would be when we would have that opportunity to really start that kind of standard due diligence. And the city can decide at that point in time as well, do we or don't we want to move forward with the purchase? So there's a number of exit points along that way if the city decides that they don't want to proceed with the purchase, even after that point. So lastly, at our last meeting, we had some discussion from the council. There were a couple of report backs that council wanted to ask, some pertaining to what's the financial implications of some public funding for lead service lines. Can we get some detailed cost estimates of due diligence? Can we see the appraisal report? That appraisal report from 2005 was included in the packet, so that was included there. So you can see how the waterworks were valued the last time we went through that process. Some more detail on the fire protection fee and a sensitivity analysis. So at this point, I'd like to ask Morgan and Jim to come forward and kind of walk through those report backs before we get into the full discussion.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm going to seek to keep my presentation relatively short, and we can address additional things and questions. But starting with the lead service line replacement and the impact of the availability of federal funding for that. Before we get into the actual numbers, I wanted to go over the assumptions that were made because assumptions needed to be made for this analysis. So the numbers that we're going to show on the next slide assume that the city is going to receive $4 million in grant funding for a 10-year replacement period. And also we assumed the current interest rate of those low the low federal loans of 1.81%. I do just want to caveat that by saying that in the fiscal year 2024 intended use plan, no utility received the full $4 million, and that's obviously dependent on the available funding moving forward. And then the other thing I wanted to mention there is the Illinois Metro Planning Council put out some figures around lead services in the state and federal funding available to replace those. And current funding only covers approximately 10% of the estimated $5.3 billion needed. So that's sort of just to point out that there's a lot of need and these grants are competitive, so something to keep in mind. Other assumptions is that there's no increased cost for federal funding, so we assumed the same Illinois American is going to experience the same cost the city would if they were to take over the system. There are certainly additional costs associated with using federal funding, whether that's Buy American requirements, Davis-Bacon wage rates, and things like that that just increase the cost. And the last assumption I want to point out is that this analysis assumes that the cost of lead service lines in Peoria are borne solely by Peoria customers. Looking at the division of Illinois American public water systems within their central division where Peoria sits, just some numbers that I found on the Illinois EPA site, Peoria makes up approximately 29% of the total services in that central division. Peoria accounts for 92% of the known lead services in that area and 34% of the unknown. So initial analysis seems to show that there's a significantly large amount of lead services in Peoria within that division. Next slide, please. All right, so these numbers get to what those assumptions were driving at before. So we looked at an annual replacement cost, which is replacing all of the known lead service lines, as well as half of the unknowns over a 10-year period. So that's consistent for both. And then when we factor in the available grant funding and the low-interest loans, we get down to a cost per gallon so that we can factor this into the analysis that we looked at 2 weeks ago. So you'll see year one, when you're only looking at 1 year of that replacement, the cost difference is relatively minor. When you look out over a 10-year period, that difference increases. The impact on this to the analysis that we looked at before, so if you remember, there was a 27% difference between Illinois Americans' rates and what the city would be looking at if they were to purchase the system. That number decreases to 11% when we look at the 10-year estimate here with the assumptions that we talked about on the previous slide. Please. And lastly, I just wanted to show this is the somewhat of a sensitivity analysis that depending on your typical residential user's consumption month to month, this is what their rate impacts would look like. So the light blue is going to be the current rates under the Illinois American rate table. The dark blue is the additional 27%. So again, this does not factor in the lead that we looked at on the last slide, but that factors in the estimated increase should the city buy the water system and need to incur those loan costs. That's what I have prepared, so happy to answer any other questions on the other sections of the report back. Any other questions?
I just had a quick starter question.
Yes.
It's Ms. Morgan. The increase is regardless of who owns it? Is this based upon the city owning only, or is it regardless of whether the city or Illinois American owned it?
So light blue, so this graph is separate from the lead discussion. So this is light blue is Illinois American, and the dark blue on top would be the additional cost associated with the city purchasing the system.
City. Okay, now I understand. Thank you. Councilmember Vespa?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Isn't it also true that if we were to buy the water company that we could give our residents a discount and charge surrounding communities more? Isn't that what other similarly situated cities are doing in Illinois?
Where?
You're not aware? Okay. All right. So you did not read the letter from Illinois American Water saying just that?
I did read the letter, but I don't know the specifics of what they were discussing.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. And the questions can be for Ms. Morgan or also for Ms. Losley from Illinois American Water. We're opening up for discussion, open up for questions at this time. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for Illinois American Water. You were talking about cyber security, which is very important given the current climate we live in. I can remember after 9/11, a previous mayor talking about concerns about terrorist attacks here in and around this area, and the fact that at that time they believed it would never happen. Yet, it wasn't even, I don't think, a year or so later, well, someone was arrested, and that individual was purported to have blueprints of the water system in his possession. And so it's not unusual now to get mail about your information being compromised. As a matter of fact, I got a piece of mail just less than a month ago. How much have you spent on cybersecurity, and how is your system designed to prevent anything like that from potentially getting in the hands of people in the future, would-be terrorists?
I do not have that number of how much we've spent on cybersecurity. I could follow up with you with that information and give you more detail. There are, like I said earlier, American Water has information technology gurus, that's what they do, and they do a lot of testing on our systems to look for any vulnerabilities. So the work is constant. I am not the right person to be answering cybersecurity questions for American Water. Another thing we could do is have the right person come back and speak with the council if that's of interest in the future. And I'm thinking about the folks that are here with me tonight. None of them are also, we're not, that's, definitely a different department. Actually, me bringing that up was really whenever you were talking about your data cleanup with your other system, your operating system here. I got to thinking about our expertise in water quality, I think is top notch. But I think one thing that we don't talk about a whole lot is our cybersecurity, in my opinion, is top notch. Because we have to be. It's imperative. And so I don't have the numbers of how much American Water has spent, and specifically Illinois American, but I'd be happy to follow up and give you that information.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Vespa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been hearing that the new chloride ions in the liquid form of chlorine that you referenced earlier corrode pipes and cause or exacerbate psoriasis. Do you know anything about that?
I don't, but there are water quality people that really do, and also I'm thinking about the folks in here with me. I don't think any of us are going to be the right person to answer that question. Like the question on cybersecurity, happy to have our water quality people answer that question. I will say that if we make any changes in our treatment, we are very mindful of doing studies on what does that do in our distribution system, what does that do for our customers. So that is something that we are testing and monitoring, but I can't speak specifically for that change.
Right, but the change makes it cheaper, doesn't it?
The change makes it safer. The reason we're going from chlorine gas to liquid chlorine is that chlorine gas in the community, it's a safer disinfectant. And we're
with
very
all due
conscious of the
respect, that's
cost.
not responsive to my question. I asked, is it cheaper?
The transition to liquid chlorine, it depends on on an operation and maintenance operating schedule. No, it's not. It's not cheaper.
Okay. Why do Peorians and people in Champaign, which are both serviced by your company, pay twice as much as similarly situated cities?
Well, as we mentioned in the letter, some of those cities that were in that stack do charge different rates for inside residents, water customers, and outside city resident customers. But I will say also, some of the cities, and I do not know all of those cities' details, could have had deferred maintenance, may have not done $300 million in investment over the last 20 years like we've done in Peoria. And so when you look at rates, and we're regulated by the Illinois Commerce Commission, the rates are based on our cost to serve, and we are committed to being safe, reliable, clean, and we're doing what we feel it takes to provide that to our customers. Are we very mindful of affordability? Absolutely. Are we looking at how can we be cutting costs and being very careful on the expenses that we have? Those are discussions that happen in our company every single day. But we also aren't going to jeopardize being clean, safe, reliable for our customers. And so that's a balance. And I think I do not know all those communities that were to the left of Champaign and Peoria, but I would say that I am proud of the work that we've done here for the customers of Peoria.
Right, and I'm glad you referenced that letter that I mentioned earlier. That's actually a reason to vote for buying the water company, right? I mean, if we can charge surrounding communities more, give our residents a discount, I think you're making the case against your company.
You could look at it that way. And we do, I will mention, we do serve, so our water plant in Peoria, and we have 2 wells, it does serve communities outside of the city of Peoria. I have a list in my notebook if you want me to tell you the names of them. It's a handful. It's not a big portion of the water system, but it is true that I'm a civil engineer that turned into a utility leader. And one thing I've learned along the way in my career is water and wastewater don't follow municipal boundaries. And if you try to do that, most of the time it's not cost effective. If you end up building just a water or a wastewater plant just for a small community, if you can regionalize. And that's what you're seeing with these munis serving fringe people on the outside, because it's more cost effective to do it that way.
Right. When you do maintenance, you pass the cost along to the people of Peoria in higher rates, right? In fact, you did that January 1st.
We get our operation and maintenance costs included in rates, yes.
In fact, you made $11 million in profit off Peoria this past year, right?
I am not, I don't know the profit number, and we don't call it profit. So in the utility world, it's return on equity. So a portion of our investments are funded by equity and a portion is funded by debt. It's that equity piece that we do get a return on that's authorized by the Illinois Commerce Commission.
Right, I understand. And your CEO made $7 million last year?
I'm also not familiar with the number for our CEO salary.
All right. No further questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Regenbach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And again, thank you both to Woodard and Kern, and thank you to you, Rebecca, for being here, or President, excuse me. We appreciate that. And if any of you question Kyle Smith's commitment to our community, I can tell you, I talked to him on Thanksgiving last year during the water main break. So he's very attentive and in tune to what our needs are. One thing, a lot of this information is stuff we've heard repeatedly in the past, every 5 years at least, but there's one thing that embarrassingly came to my attention that I wasn't aware of, and that's the assistance program that Illinois American offers to the customer assistance program that provides discount in water rates. And it's an income-based thing run by a third party, so it's totally fair and equitable. But our residents who are in need can get up to 70% of the water usage discounted. So that's something that I think is also important to keep in mind as we have the discussion about rates, that those that are in the most need have a resource available through Illinois American that we wouldn't have without digging into our coffers. So that's something that's available, and I'm sure Director Doolin and his staff know about this, but to be honest, this wasn't something that had been on my radar before, so I just want to bring that up as another one of those added add-ons that we have seen from Illinois American. But I think as we talk about this, there's so many hypotheticals and so many what-ifs and possibly this and maybe that. I think I would like to ask Director Powers to come up to the podium and just kind of give us a brief overview of his experience in Indianapolis. That was included in the email that we got late this afternoon, but I think it's very telling because it shows a municipality admittedly much larger than Peoria with much greater resources, but they bought their water utility under different circumstances, but then sold it back to the private sector upon their frustration with it. So, Director, if you could just kind of highlight it, but I'm particularly interested in your conclusion at the end, but perhaps you could give us the Cliff Notes version.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, councilors. Sure. And I will be deferring to my boss in this case, keeping in mind that I drafted this letter serving in a strong mayor government, meaning I had a cabinet position and my opinions were completely different and would be wrong for me to say anything without getting approval from the manager if you go to a point to where my true feelings would be, because I withheld names here and a few other things. Experience, who would have thought that 22 years later I would be having a conversation that I think has a lot to do with the gray hair that I have over the 10-year tenure of owning a water company in a city. You will find the conclusion that Indianapolis owned a water company for 10 years. Again, the reason they purchased it was because of an SEC decision. They saw it as an opportunity. There was a due diligence study. I keep hearing the word assumption. There are a number of assumptions that you will see in a due diligence study, meaning primarily what's buried. I can tell you that unless somebody comes and challenges me behind me, no one in this room knows what's buried here. No one, everywhere, just from the assumptions of lead, the things we've heard. That was true in Indianapolis. And 18 months into post-purchase, we found that only 38% of the work orders that we were responding to as the system owner had been disclosed, and found through legal proceedings trying to recover that what ended up being an additional $80 million bond issuance on top of the purchase was that they couldn't have known. It was an assumption. And so they were held harmless, and the city had to make a further investment in the system to upgrade it and make those corrections. That continued for 10 years to the point that the city of Indianapolis had a $700 million debt that they were owning, along with a very similar, and again, 22 years later, who would have thought there was a thing called a pre-1979 or 77 public safety pension obligation to the tune of 400 and some million, which at that time represented about 50% or equated to almost 50% of the city's annual budget, which was close to $1 billion. A city of 1 million people we're talking about here, Indianapolis. So getting to the point of the conclusion, the only positive outcome that Indianapolis had as a result of owning a water company was its sale and recouping the losses that were incurred over the 10 years. The debt was paid. The city was written a check. You'll see that for $423 million. We made huge infrastructure investments with that. We did put some reserve in. But what I could not convey in this letter was that every year in the 10 years that I was there, a council item for budget preparation was to augment the operations of a city-owned water company. That is not in this letter, because I wouldn't fair. These are all numbers. Again, I've said this to you many times. Google me. Google it. This is all public record. And again, you look at the payout. You look at the $50 million to pay someone for half of the tenure of a contract that we brought in a third party to manage. We had a termination clause that we had to pay $29 million at termination to release that to sell the water company. It was a net loss, in my opinion, even though in the end, the sale proved to be a profit. It looked like a profit For 10 years in front of an elected body, I watched debate after debate after debate of not people that were not water experts, with a water company that was rated one of the lowest in the country for water quality, one of the lowest in water quality, while the city owned it. After it was sold to a professional utility, imagine that, a utility owning a utility, it erased the loss, is now making a profit, and is now a viable water company again. That was the point I was trying to make. And I think I would be remiss as your director of Public Works to maybe, I don't know, say of everybody in the room, I don't know if I'm the only governmental official that's been through this process. I know American Water has been through the process of a buyout. I believe they were a subsidiary of Veolia. I don't know, I don't believe they still are, but again, I know there are people in American Water that have been, but here in the city, and again, we looked for, even with Woodard and Curran, we're governmental experts in this process. You're looking at one. You're looking at a person who was involved from an audit and performance perspective for 10 years in a city of 1 million people and served in the infrastructure capacity and found those assumptions that became very real during budget preparation for this body. And that's what will happen if we do it here. Those assumptions will become real, and we will be the owners. So that's the reason I felt compelled to let you know that, sir.
Thank you, Director Powers. Appreciate your
Can I have a
experience.
follow-up with that, if I may?
Yes, absolutely.
So I think something that's been left out of the equation in most of the discussions and repeatedly through the years as I've sat in on these is the fee that would be paid to an operator. I've heard many of my colleagues say, well, I want the city to own it, but we're certainly not going to run it because, you know, with all due respect, some of our street issues might affect our constituents equally. But I think it's important to note that if I'm looking at this in 2022 on your letter, approximately $50 million was the net for Viola Water to run it during that 10-year period. Does that, I mean, I don't know if you have the letter in front of you, but does
It was
that?
actually a 20-year contract, 2002, not 2022, $2,002.
Thank you.
In 2002, the city entered into an agreement with a subsidiary of Veolia Water to manage the water company, a third party. Halfway through the tenure, halfway through the agreement, meaning we sold it at 10 years into it, they had netted $50 million. Then we paid them an additional $29 million as a termination fee. So they actually netted $79 million.
So the first 10 years that they were operating it, they made $50 million.
Correct.
This third party that the city of Indianapolis paid to run their water utility.
In the early 2000s.
Early 2000s. So
Correct.
that's just a good bullet point for us to keep in mind that expense has not been included in any of these numbers as far as I understand.
And all would need to be negotiated for a third party.
Right. The other thing, this is more anecdotal, but our neighbor Peoria Heights is looking at the reverse situation to us, and they're looking to sell their water utility. And I don't have the exact date of this, but I've been told by multiple people that they actually had citizens encouraging them to sell so that they could get the water quality that the city of Peoria has. And one of their constituents even acknowledged the fact that they've paid extremely low rates through the years, but now they're paying the price with their water quality being diminished. So just a couple thoughts here, and I appreciate your comments, Director, having lived through this firsthand and not just as basing this on assumptions. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As someone who's going through this process for the first time, this is it's a lot. It's a huge decision to make when you talk about a purchase of this magnitude and the impact that it can have on the city in its future. And I appreciate the presentations this evening and the context from Director Powers. When I think about our current debt obligations, whether it's our CSO projects, whether it's our pension obligations that are going to continue to rise up until 2040, and also our debt issuance to the Civic Center as well too. I kind of compare this to, and I use sports analogies for everything, so please forgive me, but to a professional baseball team. When you have a roster and you have players on a team that are commanding huge salaries, it's hard for you to add any additional talent in the offseason. And right now, between our CSO projects, our pension obligations, as well as our debt issuance to the Civic Center, those are pretty big obligations that we have on our roster right now. And I look at the year 2040, when we get to that point, and Lord willing, our CSO projects will be completed, our debt issuance to the Civic Center will be completed, as well as our pension obligations will be fully funded. And we will have salary cap relief. And that may be a time to entertain a purchase of this magnitude when we have some debt release. Right now, I'm very concerned to add an estimated of $22 million a year in debt issuance based off our current obligations, as well as an unknown future. Right now, the city of Peoria is in a good financial state, but we do know that we have to prepare for rainy days because they will come. And so I appreciate all the comments and the information that we have today, and there's just so many unknowns and so many what-ifs, but I think I have enough to know what decision I need to make tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. I have a process question before we continue to go around. Mr. Manager, typically in our communication from the manager, from corporate counsel, typically the way that those communications come forth, they come forth as a recommendation. This communication reads, communication from the city manager and corporation counsel with a request to approve a resolution to purchase the waterworks. But it's not necessarily a recommendation. Is that right? And can you explain why it's written the way it's written?
I can. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The resolution that is in the packet is the same resolution that has been in the packet for the last 20 years in terms of what has to be adopted pursuant to the franchise agreement, and so that's listed there. But it doesn't really have a recommendation. And in years past, I have said that I really don't believe that the city should go forward with this, and it's pretty consistent with my position to that. Echoing what Director Powers would say, I think that's been, at least where we've looked at it, we've looked at other options in the past. In 2018 or 2014, we were looking at a change to a potential franchise agreement. But at this point, that's kind of where staff is, at least the Public Works Director and the City Manager are.
Okay, thank you. And just to follow up on the comments made by Councilmember Allen related to our unfunded pension liability that we're facing, I just want to ask for your tolerance with me while I recite the annual unfunded pension obligations that we expect over the next 15 to 16 years, starting with 2025, and this is putting together both police and fire pensions and what our annual amount obligation, unfunded obligation would be beginning in 2025. We are required to pay $35,925,000. 2026, $37,323,000. That's a $1.4 million increase over the previous year. 2027, $38,859,000. 2028, $40,438,000. 2029, $42,197 million. 2030, $44,059,000. 2031, $46,075,000. 2032, $48,235,000. Keep in mind that these are annual payment obligations for unfunded pension liability. 2033, $50,564,000. 2034, $53,163,000. 2035, $56,098,000. 2036, $59,458,000. 2037, $63,550,000. 2038, $68,837,000. That's a $5 million increase over the previous year. And in 2039, $77,754,000, a $9 million increase over the previous year, which is a 13% increase. So this is what we're looking at in terms of unfunded pension liability, which in 2024 it drops tremendously from $77 million down to $17 million, a huge drop after 16 years. But I just ask that you keep these numbers in mind as we consider taking on additional debt, considering our existing debt, an unknown recession, and other debt obligations. So I'm going to continue to go around. We have Councilmember Sear to hear from. We have Councilmember Kelly. We have Councilmember Euler, who's online, but still, and others to hear from. Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just don't know where to start. There's obviously, depending on which side of the equation you're on, we're all showing our colors tonight, and that's okay. That's okay. And I love the mayor's comment about the unfunded pension. That really has nothing to do with buying this company or not, since really this decision is made in Springfield, not in Peoria. And just one good year or bad year return on our capital, on the money that the committee has invested, changes all the equation, right? If we had a bull market for 10, 12 years, that would change all these numbers. If we have a bear market for 10, 12 years, we're in big trouble, a lot bigger problem than we are right now. So to me, it's not really relevant. I love my colleague, Mr. Allen. Finally found somebody to help me out with debt. We have a lot of debt, but Mr. Manager, my understanding, our biggest assets is our roads, correct, and buildings?
You mean in terms of value?
Value for assets or roads and buildings, yeah, correct? What is our return on equity on our assets?
I don't think that we've ever calculated a return on equity.
Thank you very much. I don't think there's any. Thank you very much. I'd love to have an opportunity to ask a few questions to Ms. Lossley, if possible. Madam Mayor, can I ask her something?
Lossley, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here tonight and being willing to come and answer our questions. And I have a few questions for you, but I want to say up front that, and I said that 5 years ago, I wish the city record for complaints was as good as your company's complaints. So I have zero complaint with the water company. Okay, zero. You're doing an excellent job for us.
Thank
okay?
you.
And you're obviously doing an excellent job for your company also, so congratulations. Just a few questions. You talk about 148 communities in the state of Illinois that you're serving right now.
That's
How
right.
many of these communities that you own the water system?
We own the water system in a lot of them. That we do own. Some we own water, some we own wastewater, some we own both.
So you do sign agreement. It'd be possible for the city to hire your services and your 80 employees to work and keep the same union and all that. It would be possible to come, if there's enough money, it would be possible to come to an agreement to still use Illinois American Water Company to service if we own the company, correct?
Well, you'd be asking for us to operate.
Correct.
Okay. Generally, we do not operate water or wastewater systems throughout the state. It's rare that we would do that over a long period of time. Occasionally, we will have an acquisition that is in a distressed community that they will say, can you please, while we're going through the 11-month process with the Illinois Commerce Commission, out of a concern for public health, will you please operate this system for us under a payment schedule? And we've done that in a very limited way, but throughout the state of Illinois, it's a very, very, very small piece of our business would be operating. To my knowledge, I can only think of one location, and it's very limited, that we do operate a small system. And if you want more information, I'm going to ask Ken Jones, our general counsel, to come up and talk about it.
I'm just curious of the 148 communities you just said.
Yeah.
Does that mean if it's very rare, you're saying that you own all of them then?
Yes, sir. We own all of those. We serve about 1.4 million people throughout the state.
Okay. So the comparables, we got 16 different cities approximately our size in the last presentation, which you only own the city of Peoria and the city of Champaign. Is that correct?
In that slide deck that Woodard and Curran showed, I believe that Champaign and Peoria were the only two. And I believe what she said when she was doing her presentation is that the pools she picked were cities of similar size. So to give you more cities that we own Cairo, Illinois, way down in very southern Illinois. We own the system in South Beloit, Granite City, East St. Louis, Belleville. There's 148 of them. I could start naming more if that's helpful, but I don't think it probably is. There are varying sizes from very, very small to actually quite large systems.
So try to explain to us a little bit, try to understand. So you are entitled to a 9% profit, correct?
I believe right now it is, I'm going to need Ken Jones to tell me the ROE. It's close to 9.
Okay.
It may be a little under 9. 9.78. Thank you, Ken.
So help me understand a little bit. You said earlier in your comments, I think it was, you will be investing $200 million in the next 5 years in Peoria, correct?
We are planning to invest approximately $200 million in the next 5 years.
Which is about $40 million a year.
Mm-hmm.
What is the correlation between that $200 million for 5 years and the 9.75% profit? Who will pay to make sure for these improvement and to make sure you're still getting your 9.75% profit?
Well, it's utility rate making is complicated. I'll try my best to explain it. And frankly, I have worked previously as an engineer in a municipal system before joining American Water. And so before joining American Water, I didn't understand regulated utilities. But we have a rate base, and that is always growing or declining. It's always depreciating. So there's a depreciation schedule that your rate base goes down by, and then your rate base is also increasing by the capital that you spend. So for example, if your depreciation was greater than the capital investment that you're making, then your rate base would go down, and there could be, mathematically, a rate decrease. Generally, we've seen the other way, where we're spending more money than our depreciation is happening, and that's where you're seeing rate increases. I'm going to get to the answer in a minute. So can you say your question again, please, so I make sure?
What is the correlation, or how do you get to 9.75% profit if you have to spend $200 million in the next 5 years?
So I would say that $200 million is going to be offset by the depreciation in the systems, but it's by tariff group. So there's a group of water customers that are all together in a tariff group. So I mentioned all those communities that are around Peoria. They're charged the same rates for water service that we are. We charge in Peoria. To get a little bit more into the math, as increase in capital minus the depreciation, that will change your rate base. And so if we're just talking about the 200, I don't know what the calculation of depreciation specific for Peoria would be, but there will be some delta there. That change in rate base is matched with a debt and an equity. So we carry debt, and so that cost of debt is, in utilities, generally anywhere between 45 and 55%. To keep the math simple right now, let's say it's 50-50. It's 50% debt and 50% equity. So whatever that delta is of capital spend minus depreciation, that delta up, 50% of it roughly is going to be equity, and that 50% is what you're authorized a rate of return on. This is very simplistic. Remember, I think at some point in the thing I told you I'm a civil engineer who turned into a utility leader. And we do have rates directors that are, gurus of this, that they're going to they're watching tonight and going to tell me that there's lots of nuances to rate making. But generally, that's my understanding and my best answer for you.
I appreciate that. I believe that a lot of these, the depreciation schedule will also be available to the city if we own.
Yeah.
And so that would be really an even reason to buy or sell. Just one question for city manager, just to make sure I know the answer. I think everybody knows the answer, but we issue bonds. Mm-hmm. That would be revenue bonds, right? These would be revenue bonds. That loan, that debt does not count against us for Standard & Poor's or any of the rating companies. Is that accurate?
It does not.
Thank you.
It would not count against our general obligation bonds credit. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So, I have a follow-up question, and we don't have time really, but thank you very much for your time. I have no more questions. Thank you.
Happy to chat with you offline if there's ever a need for that.
Madam Mayor, I just want to make a comment. And I talked about that last meeting where we have a company that is a $26 billion company that do not want to sell. If I don't want to sell something, I'm a $26 billion company, guess what? It's not going to happen. Now, very nice letter from Ms. Lossley here. In the first paragraph, and I just made my point when I read this letter today, while Illinois American Water has no intention of ever selling the water company. Now, my story last week was about being honorable, and honoring the deal that was made over 100 and some years ago. Well, the rules do not apply to this. If we have a company that do not want to sell, we won't be able to buy. It's that simple. I don't care. It should be very simple. Now, I should be able to make an offer, say, listen, I'm going to give you $500 million for your company. And they would say yes or no. And so if it's a no, then just not happen. If they tell us that $500 million would work, and we say, wow, that's too much money, we cannot afford that, then it's it. To me, I do not want to put my constituent to the horrible, bad spending or investment habit of going through $2 million for a due diligence, okay? I'd love to do the numbers. I'm an investing guy. I think our people, my constituent in the 5th District, like to know if what the deal would be, what the selling price would be, which we cannot answer without due diligence, what the loan amount would be, what the debt would be, what the interest rate would be, how much would they want to run the company for us? Okay, would they want to operate the company for us? How much would that cost? And after you answer these 4 or 5 questions, okay, there's leftover profit for us, for the city? And if there is, what can we do with that profit? Where can we invest that profit? Most people want to invest in roads, right? Roads, and roads, or something else. But to me, I could not answer. When people talk to me around the city of Peoria and ask a question about the water company, I could not answer those 5 questions I just talked about. And that's why, for me, I'd love to, we cannot get around doing a due diligence if we want to really answer those questions. And it's going to be painful. It's going to be painful because they do not want to sell. Okay? They should be able to just tell us, this is what I want. No, what they would do, I'm just throwing a number out there. What would $500 million do to Illinois a water company bottom line? What would it do to the EBITDA? What would it do to the rate of return? No, we're in earnings season now for the stock market right now. What would it do to their earnings if they would add $500 million? Okay, I think it would be positive. I think it would be positive, right? So obviously, we can tell by people's question which side of the fence we're on, but to me, I just those. If somebody could answer those 5 questions for me, I could say, yeah, okay, I'm a yes or I'm a no. But until that happens, I have to try to do the due diligence. I'm sorry, but this is where I'm going with this. So, 6 months ago, or not 6 months ago, 6 years ago, I started receiving mail on my house. They called me Honorable Dennis here. I've never been honorable before, but no, every night we're asked to be honorable here. And to me, that's why I want to honor this deal that they made over 100 years ago. Thank you. Sorry it took me so long, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. I just want to point out that every 5 years, the city will continue to have that option. I don't think that we're going to give that away. Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I appreciate the opportunity to call in here this evening. I'd like to start with just showing Councilmember Vest's comments. I think he really hit the nail on the head with a number of really unaddressed points here in terms of the information that we've been provided and answers to some of our expectations. And then to go into Councilmember Sears' comments about where we want to go from here. At the end of the day, it's, to me, delivering a benefit to the taxpayers. I didn't get into this business of being on the council wanting to own or run a company, but looking at a utility here where literally the option comes from the ground beneath us, and no one can really answer or discuss that. We own the right to the water beneath us, and it's being sold other places, and we're paying nearly the highest rate in the state of Illinois for it. And I can't answer that to my constituents, and I need to be able to answer that. And none of the objections or responses that I've heard from any of the parties really succeed in doing that. And so, in my opinion, we owe it to our constituents to do the analysis at a minimum. And I keep hearing that taking this vote is a vote to buy the water company, and I know in theory that that's the reality of the vote itself. But at the end of the day, it's the only way to get the information that we need to be able to make an educated decision. And having that information allows us to make the decision next week that we're not going to pursue it. And 20 years ago, they made the choice not to pursue it. But I also hear time and time again that if the decision was made 20 years ago to finish the deal, the bonds would be 2/3 or fully paid off by now, and that would be a difference that could be delivered to the taxpayers. And so I'm, at this point, going to make a motion to approve the item in front of us.
Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Sear. Continued discussion, Councilmember Gordon-Young.
I have 2 questions. One is for Director Powers. I appreciate the presentations and the additional information, but because you have direct experience in this, can you speak to, I just want to make sure I understand the process. You said that in Indianapolis, they bought the water company and sold it after 10 years?
That is correct.
Okay. What years was that again?
2000 and one or two through 2011.
Okay. Do you know the current state of the water in Indianapolis?
I can't speak to it specifically. I know that very recently Citizens Energy Group actually touted the amazing since taking the water company. And actually they have every year. They actually erase the debt and are doing a great job with the water company. I actually read an article recently from Citizens Energy Group about the very point. So again, since the water company returned to a utility, Citizens Energy Group previously for the city was the electric, gas, and they also provide chilled water and steam as products. And then of course acquired the water company and sanitary sewer from the city as a result of the city offering it for sale after 10 years. So they are now the combined utility.
And I ask that question because we have to look at quality of life, right, for all of us. And when I'm hearing from Councilmember Riggenbach about like Peoria Heights, you get what you pay for, you know, and you can pay less, but you may not have the same quality of services. And when I was researching Indiana, they rank about 44, somewhere pretty low in the United States of America in terms of having such dirty water because of the lakes and the rivers, and it's putting stress on the utilities. And so that's something that you have to look at.
Correct.
And
That's
so I don't know if you have that
water
data.
supply. Well, I can tell you this, that primarily Indianapolis was ground wells. It's a very small river in a very large city. The White River just simply did not support, we didn't have the Illinois River. And again, a city of 1 million people, most of the water supply is drawn from the ground. So there's high contents of iron, a very high pretreatment level, which contributed to some of the water quality issues and the condition of the infrastructure carrying a high iron content, than high sodium content waters. So again, corrosion and all of those things that are natural to pulling water directly from the ground, or a well, basically, all contributed to those factors of having poor water quality, along with how we were managing it as a city. And I say we because I was on that team.
So with that, I think about the expertise that's needed. And so thank you for answering my question. My second question, if you could come back up. Thank you. Can you speak to the process of the ICC with the water company, Illinois American Water?
Do you want to talk about the process for rate making, the process for just regulatory review of our business?
Regulatory review of the business.
You know, I can,
Okay.
but a better person to answer that question is our General Counsel, Ken Jones. And so I'd like to ask him to come up and answer, because I think I think he'd be better at that.
Thank you.
Anything in particular to address, just service in general?
Well, service in general, because most of us, well, I don't have any knowledge of what that process looks like, so that we know, like, what are they looking for? What's being monitored? Are there areas of deficiency? Are there areas of strength? Like, what are some of the strengths that we have now?
Yeah, and the whole scheme is, it involves the state statutes, the Public Utilities Act, the state regulations, Title 83, which governs the services provided by the utility companies, and our own particular tariffs that govern how we act day to day in the provision of services. There are, and also there's, don't forget, the regulation by the Illinois EPA and those type of regulations. So there's a constant review and reporting and implementation of all of those requirements that we daily, put out and make sure that we adhere to in our operations.
How often is that done, like those assessments or reviews?
I mean, it's continuous, and the commission has the authority, if it deems that there is any deficiency, to come in and do an investigation, things like that, just as the EPA does, and other entities. But it's and the reports, and it depends on what type of metric we're looking at. Financial reports continuous. We provide annual reports to the commission, as all utilities do, at the end of March, reviewing the previous year of all our operations, all our financial activities. So it's a really intricate and detailed overview by the commission and EPA and other entities.
So what's been the ranking? Is there like a scale, 3-star? There's numbers?
5 out of 5, but there's no official ranking. We operate at the highest levels and routinely receive customer service awards and surveys and by other metrics. We're very proud of what we do. We have great employees running our company.
Okay. Thank you for answering my question. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that up until midnight last night, I knew I would be voting against proceeding, mainly because it seemed that the information that we got, while not necessarily complete or accurate, had such a wide gap between the profits of the supposed profits of Illinois American Water and our debt service that would force us to raise rates on our rate payers. And to what end? Well, gosh, in 20 years or 30 years, they get to have a rate cut, maybe. So I was opposed. However, before I get to my motion, I would like to ask a few questions of our presenters. Ms. Losley? I am concerned about the differential in rates across the state that we saw. In the state of Illinois, are you aware of the lowest rate? What is the rate per gallon that you're charging in Peoria, Illinois? I think we know that, but for the record.
It's not rate per gallon because there is a fixed charge and there is a volumetric charge.
I understand that.
Okay.
But the rate per gallon is part of the total charge.
Is
Okay, and that is?
I cannot give you that number off the top of my head. I understand the fixed for an average customer in Peoria, the fixed charge plus the volumetric would be roughly $55 a month. That's a number I can give you, but I don't know that number off the top of my head.
All right, we'll take that, and that assumes 3,000 gallons.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You have how many cities in Illinois?
148 is the number I gave earlier.
What's the lowest rate among all those cities?
We don't have many. We call them tariff groups, and that is kind of groups where communities are together. There's not many. I don't know the answer, right? Which one is the lowest off the top of my head.
In one.
You are in one of the tariff groups. That's true.
Is there any tariff group that you're aware of that has a higher rate than we do?
I am aware of a tariff group that has a higher rate than you.
And it is Champaign?
No, it is the Chicago area.
Chicago area. And can you speak of a rough percentage differential?
No, I can't give you that number.
Oh, you can't give me the number. I'm asking for a rough
20% more.
Okay.
And also, just to add some information, it has to do with the city of Chicago and the water costs for the city of Chicago and those being passed through communities. And that adds to, and that's why that particular part of the state is unique And whenever we're making tariff groups, a lot of the time you'll try to make a group that makes sense, and that's the reason for the Chicago grouping.
Outside of Chicago, is our tariff group here average, below average, above average in cost to the ratepayer?
Average.
Average.
Yes, sir.
You must then know of some folks outside of Chicago who are paying more than we are.
I do not know. I'm happy to give you more rate information about the specific tariff groups. It'd be very easy for me to send you a table of the tariff groups where you can see.
Oh, this is on the agenda tonight.
It is, and I apologize. I
That
don't
doesn't-
have that right here with me, and I could look behind me and see if Ken Jones wants to try to answer this. He may be able to give a little bit better answer than me.
As council member, Illinois American has very few tariff groups. The city of Peoria is in the same tariff group as most of the water customers in the state. And I think there's only 3 tariff groups in the whole state. And that's to the benefit of the citizens of Peoria, because the costs of Peoria are not paid only by the citizens of Peoria. When a new plant is put in or a major investment, it's spread across the whole tariff group. And that's the design, and that's the benefit of having a larger tariff group.
Outside of any municipal tax differential, is there any difference in rate in the central group?
No.
Okay. The other 2 groups, is there a differential between them and central
Which
region?
tariff groups are you speaking of?
You said there are 3, right?
There are some differences. That's why there are different tariff groups.
Okay, so...
And I don't know those differences, if that's what your question is.
Okay. It seems kind of incredible that we seem to be paying so much more than any number of communities. We heard about deferred expenditures, etc. Deferred expenditures end up catching up with you. None of these people started a water system last year. They've had water systems for 100 years, 150 years. And it seems like their deferred costs haven't caught up with them. Otherwise, their rates would be as high as ours. Being in that business, do you have any idea why some of these communities have such lower rates than we do? And I don't think deferred maintenance for all those cities is a good answer, but that's up to you.
You have to recognize the rate-making process. Municipalities don't go through that full cost of service rate-making process. A lot of the costs that in our rate-making are part of our full cost of service rates. Those are not accounted for in their water rates, their sewer rates, that their municipal systems pay. The costs that we would pay in our rates are paid through taxes of their citizens, higher taxes, because they are the paving budget, which is involved in paving the street after a water main is repaired. Those don't necessarily get accounted for in the water rates. They get paid for through other means, through taxes or some other method. So it's really apples and oranges. You can't compare the municipal rate-making method with the private utility company rate-making method through the commission. So it's really not a comparison that you can make.
So far, fair enough. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Manager, if we're to bond this out, we're talking revenue bonds. Now, when we do a TIF district when we do a few other things that are revenue, specific revenue based, we often back them up with a GO. Would these be backed up with a GO?
Well, if you issue revenue bonds that are not backed up with a GO bond, in which it would apply towards our debt limit, and we have a limitation on the amount of debt that we can issue that's general obligation bonds, it's likely that the cost of borrowing is going to be higher than what has been calculated here, because you're going to have to carry debt service reserves on revenue bonds that are going to have a coverage ratio likely 25% higher than some of the numbers we've actually been discussing. Because you're going to have to, if you're issuing just 100% revenue bonds, you're going to have that level of support as well.
So backing up those revenue bonds with a GO guarantee is really out of the question.
With the sheer volume of what you're talking about borrowing here, which could be, again, we won't know until you go through the process and you come up with a number, it's going to be significant. So I don't think that it would probably push us very close to where our general obligation debt limit currently exists.
So it might be inside our limit?
No, I think it would push us over that.
Oh, okay. And to your understanding, were the very preliminary and estimated figures that we saw, is it your feeling that the assumed interest rate on the bonding in there was reasonable?
Yes.
Okay.
I think the estimates of the interest rates right now were reasonable.
For revenue bonds?
For revenue bonds.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Powers, Director Powers, thank you, Mr. Manager. Do you know what the water rates are in Indianapolis and whether or not some of that rate is covered by taxation or other sources?
I do not today. I know that was one of the benefits of municipal ownership, was not the taxation was absent. I believe it is taxed. Now, I do not know.
I'm sorry, when it was municipal?
It was not taxed when it was municipally owned.
And do you know the water rates today under the private?
I do not know. No. Okay. I basically fact-checked my letter that I wrote you because I was going from memory, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't misquote. So the numbers you have I know are factual, but I did not drill that deep, just like I didn't drill into the past annual budget amounts because I didn't have time, basically, as I was crafting the letter.
Thank you. And by the way, I often misquote. And usually I don't know it until I get corrected. But anyway, I know you're much more careful than I am.
Sir.
Madam Mayor, I don't have much confidence that a buyout would be successful. And I think that as I say, the gap that seems to exist between the assumed profit of Illinois American and the debt service creates such an increase that our ratepayers would really be harmed. And we're trying to make our city more attractive, not less. Nevertheless, I've had a few discussions, mostly today, where some people are looking at indemnifying us for part of this. And after a long discussion, I suggested to them that if they want to put a proposal together for us, fine. So therefore, I would move to defer this item for 1 week. I've checked with the manager. We can take this up next week at the budget session. And by that time, if those folks have something worthwhile to show us, fine. Otherwise, we'll proceed as we are this evening. So, thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Is there a second? By Councilmember Vespa. Vote on the deferral. If it fails, we'll come back and vote on the approval. Any discussion? This vote is on the deferral till next week.
I'd like to
Councilmember,
speak to the deferral.
Okay, I'll get right to you, Councilmember Euler. Councilmember Valpula.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have one question for Ms. Lossley.
It has to be about the deferral. It does. It does. It has to be.
Okay, I'll make sure. So the entire memorandum we got is based off on that 3,000 gallons, whatever calculations we got. And then based on that, we also got a number that says that every month we pay 50, close to 50. That's what you just said, 55. So can you tell me a rate estimate for the next 20 years? What will be the bill of the people in Peoria? Will it be 50 or will it move to 75?
So I don't have an ability to tell you what the rates will be 5 or 10 years from now, because we'll have to go through that process.
Thank you. The clarification that I am seeking here is that one of the most important things that I see in this document is an increase, the 27%, if we are going to go ahead with that. In our case, maybe I may be very wrong in understanding or interpreting these things, but so the trajectory of the payment would be 27% up for a few years, then it goes down for the city of, if we own the water company or if we buy the water company. Let's put it as a perspective. Let's say if we have it. So in the next 20 years, the rate that we are going to pay will go down drastically rather than taking water from Illinois American Water. Does that sound right?
I understood that your rate would go up by that 27% because of the debt service that you would have to take on in order to pay American Water for the system. And so then there would be a period with which you have that debt completed, and then that cost would be eliminated. But still, if the city of Peoria owned this water system, you'd have to do capital improvements just like we would. You may look at it, your engineers may review it and see it differently, but I think that likely it would be somewhere close to what we have estimated. We believe in our process, and we're reviewed by the Commerce Commission for prudency of our investments. And so I would anticipate you would have a similar capital expense if you owned it as we do.
Thank you so much. And then, Madam Mayor, I have a follow-up question to the city manager.
Yes.
So, Mr. Manager, I was in the council this is my third year on the council. I've been sitting on this seat for 3 years. And now we hear that we have a debt of $30 million, then goes to $40 million, then goes to 67. At one point in 2040, probably we are going to go to 17, right? How do you see that? How do you see us paying? I mean, it's unrelated, but I just wanted to know your thoughts on that. How do you see that you pay $40 to $50 million every year?
That's the $40 million question that we're facing over the next 16 years. The issue, it comes from two places. You're either going to have to raise taxes or you're going to have to cut services, period.
Okay. And may I ask Director Powers to the podium, please? Thank you, Director Powers. I read your document with multiple angles. I really liked what you said. Tell me something that a city can gain $420 million in 10 years. How does it do it? How to do that?
So, again, without having the numbers, that was what was missing. That I frankly didn't have time to go back and look at the annual budget build for Indianapolis during the tenure of the ownership of the water company. The water company was evaluated based on a lead agency. I believe it was Fabre, Baker & Daniels was the law firm that we hired for the sale to lead the team, similar to due diligence, to turn over the water system and evaluate it. The valuation was actually $1.5 billion. The 0.4 was added after that fact based on some factors, again, and assumptions of what we thought the value was in 2011. So the $423 million, again, that's why I said it's important and critical to consider what I could not provide you, which was annually during the budget process for the city of Indianapolis, there was a line, not debt, line, paid to the water company to offset the losses that I did highlight already, meaning we were every year incrementing debt up to the point at when we sold it of $700 million in debt service, and annually augmenting the operation of the water company in the budget. My point of pointing that out was that what I showed you did not consider those annual expenditures that were not shown as debt. But if you were to go back and look for that 10 years of annual budget build, you would find those expenditures for water company augmentation, which I would then subtract from the $423 million, because that was not in a savings account accruing interest. That was 10 years of operational expense added to the lost revenue, quite frankly, that the city was experiencing throughout the entire tenure of owning the water company. That was my point, that after 3 years of due diligence, which, by the way, due diligence studies include a lot of assumptions, because a due diligence study is not going to get what's buried. It's still buried. The same due diligence was done at the end toward the sale and assumptions made. What Citizens Energy was able to take advantage of, being in the same city where it operated, failing for 10 years, and those losses, and watched keenly. So they knew what we had replaced. They knew, as a fact that was just made, we did make capital investments every year, oftentimes by surprise, by that third party coming before an elected body saying, this needs to happen. And an elected body, not a regulatory commission, an elected body having to make a decision about the drinking water supply. That's why I noted that. The ability to fight fires, your drinking water supply, that vital. You were forced to make that decision, and it was never no, because it was the drinking water supply. But yet, employees were being laid off. We had a pension debt. All of those things were still happening, but the water company was operating in a deficit. But every time a capital investment came before the elected body, it was approved because it was our drinking water supply. And I say, this is our drinking water supply. That's what we're talking about. It is that vital. And its quality is that vital. So that's what led me to, I think, with, as you can tell, a little bit of passion, to inform you of what we are going or possibly going into.
Thank you, Director Provost. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Top motion that we have on the floor is to defer for 1 week. It's got a motion by Councilman John Kelly, seconded by Councilman Mike Vespa. Please cast your ballots.
I had an initial.
Oh, hold on. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't get back to you. Nobody's cast a ballot yet. Councilmember Euler, please.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to comment. I think after 5 years of analysis, another week is complete waste of the constituents' time, our time, the discussion. We've had 5 years to analyze this, and it needs to pass or die on its own merits tonight. So I will not be voting for a deferral. I don't see a single thing that's going to come out of one more week's worth of discussion. Thank you.
You're welcome. Please cast your ballots. Motion fails with 3 yeas, Kelly, Vespa, Valpula. Okay, now we are going to vote. So we clear the tally here. Now we are going to vote on the motion to approve a resolution to purchase the waterworks. Councilmember Graham.
On October 16th, I received an email. I think it's a very telling email. The state of affairs we're looking at tonight. Constituent wrote, Chuck, this is the year for the council to either make an offer or wait 5 more years. I'm not hearing anything from anybody. Is anything happening below the surface? I'm not making this stuff up. There doesn't seem to be any organized effort to make the case for buying the water company. If that's the case, it's a shame. Is there any organized effort to make the case for purchase? Things are very quiet, so I'm guessing that the council will take a pass. Folks, I've been on both sides of this issue for my 23 years. I've been involved in the process some 4 times. I was very, very depressed when we missed it by 1 vote. But you know what? In order to do something as consequential as this, involving so much money, we have to have the support of the business community and labor and the people who live in our neighborhoods. We have failed to make the case. When we have put this to the voters in the past, overwhelmingly the voters say, no, there are more important things for the city government to do than to buy the water company. When are we going to respect labor? When are we going to respect the people who live in our neighborhoods? Now, if this is a good idea, the work needs to begin today. Target year, 5 years from now. And you have to get labor on board. You have to get business on board. And you have to sell it to the community. We are not there tonight. So I'm not going to support this effort at this time. Manager, there must be a mistake because on the council communication, meeting date October 24, 2023, it says there's a communication from you and the Corporation Council with the request to approve a resolution to purchase the waterworks. And you say you're not for it. B.
Well, because it has to, we have to have the resolution coming forward for at least consideration.
So let's say we don't want to approve the resolution at this time, during this 5-year time. What should we be moving to do?
Well, I think there is an active motion on the floor to approve this resolution. So if you don't want to act on that, a no vote would be the
So then we'd be coming at it from a negative perspective. But it seems like your recommendation should be to disapprove the resolution.
We put the resolution out there, understanding the very strong opinions on both sides that the council certainly holds with this issue.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It was moved by Councilman Euler, seconded by Councilman Seer, to approve a resolution to purchase the waterworks. I see no more discussion. I would ask you to please cast your ballots. Councilmember Euler?
Aye.
Motion fails with 4 ayes: Seer, Euler, Vespa, and Velpula. Okay, moving on. Madam Clerk?
We are now at unfinished business. Item number 23-343, a communication with the request to hold a discussion on the 2024-2025 biennial budget. There's a handout, a report back on your desk.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mr. Manager, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to actually turn it over to our Finance Director, Director Craddy, to walk through very briefly the report backs and see if there's any additional questions that Council may have as we, kind of move into the budget discussion portion.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. As the manager said, I'll be brief. We've had a long discussion this evening so far. So at your desk, as well as it was emailed to Council on Friday night of last week, there are 14 report backs. Those report backs include figures on the unemployment in Peoria, some ARPA spending detail, the city's debt schedule, the city manager budget detail, the council budget detail, planning for our CSO spending, violence prevention funding, a timeline on that violence prevention funding, the cost of adding painters to the budget, pension funding report back, historic capital spending in the budget, federal and state grants and whether they are competitive or not competitive, strategic planning alignment, and then the last one was an elevator speech for the budget. One item I will add, just for the record, in terms of the federal and state grants, competitive versus non-competitive, I missed an X on the $5 million for Fire Station 16. That was a non-competitive. But what I always want to make sure that we point out with that is that does not mean that staff did not put a lot of time and effort into working with our legislators on getting those earmarked dollars. It just meant that we didn't have to actively do an application process to receive that grant. And so with that, I'm free for any questions the council may have on the report backs.
Director Craddy, I'm not to that page yet, but did we include the more recent $1.4 million IDA funding for rehab?
We had not.
Okay, so that's another 1.4 million competitive, right? Okay. Questions on report backs? And we'll be taking this up next week, Tuesday, October 31st. So thank you very much. I think we do have some questions. Councilmember Graham?
Manager, I'm not really trying to pick on you tonight, but what in the hell is an elevator speech?
Well, I think we were talking about that at the last council meeting, about just some talking points on the budget, what was included in that, how can we be promoting that a little bit more about what's in the budget. So we took the liberty of writing up some of those bullet points for you to say, if you had to just describe the budget in 4 or 5 bullet points, here's what you would have. So that was
Not the same thing as Muzak, is it?
No.
All right.
Short and sweet. If you're riding in an elevator with somebody and you have 60 seconds to explain it.
Thank you.
Councilmember Regenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not specific to any report backs, can I go into other issues now as well?
Sure.
I would just point out to my colleagues in the capital investment plan, page 73, Glen Oak Avenue from Berkeley to Pennsylvania. This is the section of Glen Oak that runs through the OSF campus from Berkeley up to the Pennsylvania roundabout. It has future funding, but nothing in the foreseeable future. I would point out to my colleagues that the OSF Cancer Center will be opening early next year, a $250 million investment that OSF has made in the heart of our city. And they're concerned about the condition of the road. I know that we had a redevelopment agreement with them when the East Village Gross-Al TIF came together. So, Mr. Manager, I would like you to dig into that RDA and see what their responsibility is for that section of a street. But I would certainly ask my colleagues to make this a priority so that when that center opens next year, that there is a new street in front of it. We're going to have people coming in literally from around the Midwest to receive treatment there, and I think we owe it out of respect for their investment as well as those coming into our community. Certainly, we want to explore the RDA to its fullest to make sure that they partner with us on this, but they also are partnering with us with a $250 million investment. Another thing I would like to point out, and forgive me if my colleagues have all seen these, but some of these headings throw me off, and there's items within the headings that I didn't realize. So on page 145, under sidewalks and ADA ramps and qualified census tracts, this project is to provide improvements from Morton Square Park to the riverfront. The communication here says to Jefferson, but I'm challenging us to go all the way to the riverfront. Just as a point of perspective, Evans Street is a street that I got acquainted with as we were debating the riverfront apartments, and I don't want to say that twice, but I discovered what a great entrance that could be to the riverfront and how the North Valley is really lacking any access to the riverfront. We approved money for Spring Street improvements, for the engineering for that, but that's at least 10 years out. So what I am proposing here and what we have the community support for is to make improvements to the sidewalks, to the lighting for Morton Square Park, where we have designated money for the Park District to make a significant investment. You would walk about 2 blocks and you'd get to the Romaine Arts Center, which is another landmark there in the North Valley, and go a couple more blocks and you would be at the riverfront. Now, clearly, Adams and Jefferson are going to be problematic, and our city engineer was not, didn't take her long to point out that IDOT will never approve that, but I want us to have the vision, because I think it's a matter of equity, it's a matter of providing access for all of our residents to allow the people in the North Valley not to force them to go down to downtown to get to the riverfront. So I think this is a great connector for many of the projects, for many of the investments that have been made in that part of town, and I would strongly encourage council to direct staff to find that funding. There's a potential earmark from Congressman Sorensen that is the placeholder here, but I don't want this to be tied up with if that was earmarks don't go through, and who knows if Congress will even be in session again. But I just want to highlight this as a priority for me, as a priority for the 3rd District, and I hope a priority for this council.
Thank you, and we'll be able to take up some of that discussion hopefully next week, but if you captured that, manager, you can put together cost so we can consider. Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to say that the manager and I met. One of the things we discussed was the council budget, and of course there's a write-up of it in the reports back. I would just like to say that I am satisfied with my discussion with the manager on that item. The other item that I had was the pension funding report back. And if I can quote toward the end of that section, we're talking about all the different things that can happen in the pension fund itself beyond its rate of return. So I'm on page
34?
35.
35, okay.
On page 35 at the bottom of that page. Taking all these areas into account, it's very difficult to understand the impact of additional payments. I think perhaps meaning to understand the impact that additional payments would fully make on the unfunded liability of the plan as well as the annual contribution. Providing additional resources to the plan would allow interest earnings to be made on additional dollars, which would increase the overall asset levels of the fund. However, any large-scale changes in benefit structure or any of these 5 areas which were above this could limit or even erase those gains because of an increase to liabilities. The state of Illinois is considering benefit. Of course, that's correct. Of course. However, with or without an additional contribution, those changes would affect the overall liability. Of course they would. If you throw more money in, the negative effect is less. Correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Now, I don't know if we're going to throw more money in or not, but the point I was trying to make was we are in a position where we have more money than we've ever seen before, and it's going to disappear. It's going to go away. And one spot that might buy us some better, a better position in the future is to take, I don't know how much, a few $1 million more and put it into the pension fund instead perhaps of some other, instead of adding it to the capital account or maybe, whatever. The pension funds are down right now, okay? They got smacked pretty good, okay? It's a good time to invest. And if this in general is a good idea, well, when markets are down, it's an even better idea. I'll stop. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. And Manager, haven't we done that? Didn't
We
that
have
last
increased over the last couple of years our contributions up to the levels that the pension boards are requesting every year.
Okay.
But no more. Correct?
We are correct.
Yes.
Okay. I understand. Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To my colleague, Mr. Riggenbach, I'm 100% behind you on the Cancer Center. I think it's a great idea. I mean, we need to put our best foot forward for that. And with your help tonight, we found an extra $2 million that we were going to spend somewhere else. Now we have it for your road. So congratulations. We found the money already. Mr. Craddy, thank you very much for all the work you do. I can't see you over there, but I know you're there. And the report back, the budget itself, the 3-ring binder, and the reports back were great, very informative. So thank you very much. I've only got one more report back from me since we had this conversation tonight. We have revenues of roughly $291 million in the budget, with expenses of $321 million. So there's a $30 million gap there. You have been extremely, extremely nice and low-key about the possibilities of recession in the future or bad times, and I applaud you for that. But we all know, I hope, that it's not going to be this rosy for many years. So my report back, I'd like to know this $30 million we're talking about using our own cash. Now, we're talking about not issuing any more debt, which I'm really happy about that. But we want to use our cash, right? $30 million. I'd like to have a report on
exactly where that $30 million would be spent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Okay. All right. Do we need to receive and file that?
I think we have it listed as a continuing discussion. I know that we did change the rules to say that this would be an ongoing discussion until the
Okay.
council's ready to go forward. So
Okay.
I don't think there's any need to receive and file. It'll
Okay.
just be back on the unfinished business of the agenda
Okay.
for next.
That
Well,
wraps
it'll be
up.
the special meetings agenda for next.
Sure. Thank you. Madam Clerk, moving on.
Item number 23-339, a communication with a request to approve the 2023 strategic plan.
Mr. Manager, and I wanted to point out to everyone, we lost Councilman Euler from the phone call, so he's not able to reconnect.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This item is the adoption of the strategic plan. We had deferred this item. We do have a memorandum that was emailed to council on Friday afternoon as well that's been attached that has some suggestions on some modifications to some of the objectives in the plan. It talks about specifically towards DEI. We have with us virtually Charlene Kirangozi from Barry Dunn. She has been working with us. As you know, she was here for the kickoff that we had back in June where she was helping to facilitate that. As well, our Assistant City Manager, Kimberly Richardson, who I will turn the floor over. We do have a presentation that we want to kind of walk through with the strategic plan, and then hopefully we can answer your questions as we go forward.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson.
Thank you, Manager. And excuse my voice. I'm still recovering. So, but before we move forward, I just want to acknowledge this effort because this effort started before June 1st and continued all the way through the end of September. And as much as I'm the person that you continue to hear from and communicate with, I also recognize that I had a team behind me internally. And I just want to acknowledge them first before we move forward because sometimes we forget that. And so this was an interdepartmental effort. And I say that because our city manager's office is pretty small but mighty. So I want to acknowledge first Donna Jameson, of course, the administrative assistant to the mayor and council, as well as Stacy Peterson, and some very enthusiastic junior staff members, Amanda Hall in our finance department, as well as Kayla Dre, as you all know her. They really were out in the community helping and assisting along with the other colleagues within the organization. But anytime I sent an email saying, can we do, they were immediately saying, yes, I can, and they were on top of it. So I just want to acknowledge them publicly and thank them for their efforts in making sure that this moved forward and this community-informed process occurred in a way that everyone hopefully felt heard through the process. So I just want to acknowledge that. With that, because of my limited vocals, I'm going to pass on to Charlene to do a quick overview. We want to be very quick. A number of you have already seen this presentation, but for the public, we want to kind of give an overview of the process, of the mission, vision, and then of the council's strategic priorities and goals. Once we get to that process, then I will be open to answer any questions directly and provide any additional information if necessary. So I'll hand it over to Charlene, and she can begin her presentation.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Thank you for having me here tonight. Just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen before I proceed.
We can.
Alrighty. My name is Charlene Kirangozi. I'm a manager with Barry Dunn, the firm retained to assist with facilitating the strategic planning process. So as Kimberly mentioned, I'll be doing kind of a brief overview of the plan for anyone that was not already being involved in the process. But before we get too far, I wanted to kind of bring us back to give a brief description of what a strategic plan even is for anyone, in case this is new for anyone in the audience. So a strategic plan is really intended to define the what and not the how. It's looking at what the city is looking to become and also looking to identify certain priorities that you'd like to focus on to be able to achieve that vision. In addition, it's also identifying performance measures to make sure that you're constantly evaluating progress towards your plan to make sure that it's going to be a living document that's guiding any decision making related to your budget, long-range capital investments, as well as services, but most importantly, it's a tool for government transparency and accountability. The how will really be defined in the implementation plan. This is after the plan is adopted. We would then plan to work with staff to look to determine how all of this is going to be accomplished. As part of the strategic plan, it was the city's commitment that this plan be community informed. The first step was really the 2-day community event study circles that were held on June 1st and 2nd, which drew over 300 participants. In addition, we also looked to employ multiple methods to engage the community. We conducted interviews with diverse stakeholders, had public engagement tool that was called Social Pinpoint, which really allowed for survey responses and idea submittal, and also held 3 community forums across different city geographical areas and reviewed demographic and economic data as context to the plan development. The themes that you're seeing here are some of the main themes based on the feedback that we received throughout the community engagement period. Those are reflected on the slide up above. Some of these topics were actually during the June 1st and 2nd event. However, there are some new community needs and concerns that came up throughout our community engagement process. All individual stakeholder input and survey responses were compiled, analyzed, and coded by theme. And a response, idea, or comment had to be mentioned a couple times for it to be listed as a theme. So just some more as far as the process to actually develop the plan. So to begin developing the draft plan following public engagement period, a few sessions were held in August, first with the council and mayor to really set the direction for the plan by identifying the mission, vision, and strategic priorities as well as its goals. Following that, city staff leadership were tasked with identifying specific objectives and outcome measures that will move the city closer to accomplishing the direction set forth by elected officials. The work that comes after the plan, as I mentioned, is going to be the development of the implementation plan, which really looks to operationalize the plan to help ensure that it's remaining and it's a living document. Just some brief descriptions of what those are for those of you in the audience that, this may be new. The mission statement is intended to describe an organization's purpose or reason for existing, and the vision statement is intended to define your desired future state and also providing direction. And guiding principles are essentially core behaviors that are intended to guide an organization. So what you're looking at now are the statements that were developed based on the feedback that were received. So Peoria's current mission statement now reads, Peoria's mission is to provide excellent services, protection, and infrastructure that fosters a high quality of life. And its future state is Peoria is a thriving all-American city, rich in history and natural beauty, with an abundance of opportunities for everyone. And again, guiding principles are how the city will conduct its business, make decisions, as well as delivering programs and services to the community. So these are the guiding principles that made it to the top. So, collaboration, dignity and respect, stewardship and accountability, informed decision-making, and public safety. So really things that public should expect when receiving services from the city overall. So as far as these strategic priorities, I wanted to note that these are listed in alphabetical order. I plan on reviewing these at a high level, and as Assistant City Manager mentioned, if members of the council have any specific questions on the objectives, we'll look to take those at the end. So just a quick definition again. So priorities are intended to essentially identify what the city will focus on in the next 5 years based on community feedback. And your goal statement are more of the long-term, broad, and continuous statements that will define how the city will continue to make progress towards your vision within each of those priorities. So these are the priorities that were identified: business growth and prosperity, community safety, downtown development, embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, infrastructure, and lastly, quality of life. So the goal statement for business growth and prosperity reads, diversify Peoria's economic portfolio and improve processes that make our city an exceptional place to live, work, and do business and invest. Community safety. Invest in holistic crime reduction programs and collaborative initiatives that address root causes issues so that everyone feels safe in Peoria. Downtown development. Attract commercial and residential development of all types, including mixed use, to create a safe, thriving, and entertaining downtown area. Embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. Invest in equity and address disparities by working with our community partners to make Peoria a city where everyone feels heard, included, and respected. Infrastructure. Improve streets, sidewalks, lighting, and broadband to increase safety and accessibility across all neighborhoods. Last but not least, quality of life. Create a system among Peoria varied sectors, so schools, arts, medicine, etc., to support the availability to rich, diverse, and fulfilling programs and amenities for our residents and visitors. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant City Manager just to speak to some of the feedback that we received from the community as it relates to the draft plan, as well as talk through some next steps. Kimberly?
Thank you. Just quickly, so we hosted two forums on September 28th. We had over approximately 60 community members participating throughout the entire city. What I would say that they came back with was very positive, and that they appreciate a number of them had participated in the June 1st or 2nd event, as well as some of our community forums that we hosted throughout the summer, and felt that the plan overall did hear what they were saying were priorities to them as the community members. There were areas which we addressed in the memo that they did say would be something that they would like to see at some point addressed. A number of them, in particular, around seniors, since we did not call out senior populations, and that's those who are aging in place in the community, as well as areas around sustainability and electric vehicles, having the infrastructure in place for those vehicles to be able to be housed in homes, and having the infrastructure in the home to be able to allow for those to have those vehicles. Mental health was mentioned as well. Again, looking at public safety, and also how does the arts play into public safety as another form of an avenue. As the conversation progressed, I said to the community members that one thing I'll have to say is that the way that we wrote the outcomes within our strategic plan, they're iterative, which means that over time, we are going to continue to build more outcomes to address the goals that are set by council. And that even though they may not be in this first, as in the draft of the initial strategic plan, because how we're planning to present the plan moving forward through our dashboard and having ongoing conversations with the council annually, we will build those we will have the opportunity to build those areas into the plan goals as the council sees fit. So I wanted to present the feedback to you, which we've done not only in the presentation, but also in your memo. And we will continue to incorporate the feedback in other ways as we move beyond just the plan, but also as we are looking at the implementation, which itself is going to be another process that we're going to have to take, because it's great to have a plan. Now we have to execute the plan. And so the next step will be doing that work, which is going to happen once the council adopts their strategic plan. Okay. So with that, the next step is, of course, once the adoption occurs, then we will have the opportunity to come back to council. We will present the implementation of the strategic plan. But with that being said, before I move forward, I also want to acknowledge there were a few comments, or excuse me, there was an opportunity for the council to provide comments and feedback to me as part of the review. I did receive a number of questions related to one particular area, which was priority embed diversity, equity, and inclusion. And there were questions in there about the language. So what I did provide to council in a communication that was sent on Friday, but also in your packet, was clarification to the language, just so understanding this is new language to some. We wanted to make sure for the community purposes, we wanted to make sure it's clear. So we provide some additional details of what does that mean when we talk about equity in the way that we're using that terminology. So with that, and I don't know if this is the time, I do want to bring up, there was 2 objectives that we as staff felt was necessary for us to adopt the language or adjust the language so it could be clear to the community members and to you as council. And one would be, as we discuss, objective, improve the use of racially disaggregated data for decision making. And I'm sorry, but I forget sometimes I have on my public admin hat, and I think everyone knows what disaggregate data means. And so recognizing that that's pretty jargony, what we've instead replaced that language with is improve the use of data broken down into smaller subpopulations to inform decision making. It's the same, but we want it to be clear so that the community understand what that language means. And then secondly, the other objective that would come in front of the council to recommend revising is related to objective, integrate proactive equity ambition into every plan and program. Again, my admin hat. I need to make sure my language is clear. So we are asking for council to consider the revision to, where possible, use equity to inform policymakers of potential gaps and or negative outcomes. And that is the same relatively, it's just more cleaner and more understandable to the public of what we are talking about when we say equity ambitions. As we recognize that every opportunity is gonna be able to allow for it, but we want to, where can, make sure that that effort is occurring at the staff level. With that, I will turn back over to the mayor or to the manager if there's any further questions.
Well, I just want to start out by thanking Ms. Charlene. Thank you for your presentation throughout this process, and thank you. You thank your team, Manager Richardson, but I also want to thank you for your leadership from the very beginning of this process. And you know, I know you participated not just in helping to put together the June 1st kickoff, which included over 400 stakeholders throughout the city, but also in those sessions throughout the community. You were there at each one of those sessions, for what I understand. So I appreciate your leadership in working with Barry Dunn. I also want to thank my council colleagues for taking a leadership role and full participation in developing this strategic plan. It's the council's plan, it's the council's role to approve, it's the city's staff's plan, it's the community's plan, but it has to be approved by the city council. So I thank my colleagues for your full participation. Councilman Riggenbach and Councilman Sear were involved in helping to interview and select Barry Dunn, the firm that we selected to help lead us through this process. And I think that, again, what we have is not a plan that can't be tweaked along the way because it's a living, breathing document. So we have to make it work for us. And we're going to evaluate how we're doing along the way in terms of our outcomes and our measures. And not just every 2 years, Councilman Sear, we're going to evaluate this every year and make sure that we're keeping on track. So I just want to thank everyone for their participation. I think that we have a good document. You're going to go back and make it look pretty, right? Add some pictures and have a document that we can be proud of and present to the city. Are there any questions, comments from the council? Is there a motion? Councilmember Allen?
Move for approval.
Is there a second? Councilman Velpula? Councilman Regenbach?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to echo your remarks and especially thanking the Assistant City Manager Richardson. To be honest, I was a little skeptical what community involvement of this magnitude could look like, and in cooperation with our friends at Barry Dunn, I'm just smiling from ear to ear looking at that 400 people that showed up at the opening day. I mean, that just showed the enthusiasm and the engagement of our community. And
yes.
I think we can all be proud of the way the community responded to this opportunity. So while the council has taken the step tonight to officially adopt it, this truly is the people's strategic plan for Peoria. And that's something I don't know if we've been able to say in the past. So well done, Assistant City Manager. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Graham?
Yes, I'd like to zero in on quality of life and the bullet item, consider addressing how to provide support for pre-K through 12 grade employees. What does that mean, since we don't have employees
Yes, so
of that nature?
that was a comment made in our conversation with the community members. And what they were saying that the support, how can the city help support the school district in supporting their staff? And we talk about looking at the student population, the juvenile population, the youth, but there's also the education. They're and wanting to figure out how the city can better collaborate with the school districts to support not just the student population, but also the population that is the employees, the teachers. So that was a comment that was made. It wasn't, it's something that we can consider, but it was a comment that was asked, and I just wanted to share that with the council.
Well, I was hoping it might mean that our $250 million cancer center would encourage us to communicate better with all of our school districts that are in part of Peoria, any part of Peoria, as to how they might refine their curriculum to make their students have a higher state of job readiness to go after some of the medical jobs that this $250 million project might mean. And of course, we've had a lot of advancement in the area of medicine in this community, with our number one employer now certainly being medical. And so that's how I interpreted it, but I'm just not sure I'm on the same wavelength with you on that.
Here's the thing, the wonderful thing about the interpretation of others' language is that we can interpret how best the council would like to proceed. I think you are correct. When we say K-12, we're not just speaking about Peoria Public School. We recognize we have multiple schools as well as private schools. And so this is an opportunity of where can we better collaborate with all our schools. And so I like your recommendation, and I think we should, I actually took a note of that because that's something that we should consider as part of our discussion with the implementation.
Under community safety manager, it says we should have an inclusive feedback system for public safety, that it is missing now. What does that mean?
So what we heard, again, when having these conversations with the community, was that there isn't a very clear communication loop that is inclusive. And when I say inclusive, we're not just speaking to one subpopulation. We have a growing population that are diverse in culture, in language, in ability, and how are we making the public safety aspect of our community accessible to them. And so having a more inclusive is talking about how to better reach subpopulations in our community more effectively. That may be a different way because certain cultures have a different interaction with police historically, and so we want to make sure that, and when we talk about engagement, it's done in a way that we are connecting with all communities within our city.
Well, I kind of think we've been doing a really good job in this area with our current police department and administrative leadership, as well as with our Community Advisory Commission that Andre Allen is a liaison to, getting out into the community. I know on a very hot day, I was very heartened to see people, I think it was 90-some degrees, walking down Sheridan Road, knocking on doors and handing out pamphlets. So I suppose we can always do better there. Thank you for your elaboration on that. One other section I want to get to that I just want to say this. Equity is not a new concept. Back when I was a college student at Bradley, some of my Marxist professors, even not Marxist professors, made us buy books written by Herbert Marcuse and Antonio Gramsci. One of my professors thought Gramsci was the greatest Marxist of all time. It was an exciting time back in the late 60s and early 70s. You could go to demonstrations. Some of the people who wanted to tear down the American capitalist system would show up in their Corvettes with no shoes and socks on. It was a great time. The only thing is, I kind of thought our free enterprise system was the best system in the world. And I saw how grotesque Marxist systems were once they were implemented in various countries. All the people who were literally oppressed, in some cases killed. We don't need to look much farther than the old Soviet Union or Mao's China, or for that matter, the fascist command economies, Italy, Germany, to understand how corrosive those movements were. But equity, as I understand it, can mean various things to various people. And I think that I need to know exactly, so this council signs off on this, what our definition of equity is. Does it mean that we are, and I think you've touched on this with the new document that was on the desk this evening, does that mean everybody has to have the same outcome regardless of effort that they place into whatever endeavor they are involved in? Is that what it means? Because that's kind of like neo-Marxism. So I'm just not sure that I'm buying into neo-Marxism.
Okay. So I can only speak from my professional experience. I have not experienced Marxism, so I don't know. But I can tell you I have worked in communities that have put equity as part of their priorities. And it's a process, and I recognize from a government standpoint, it's new in our profession, and so it's one that we talk a lot about the D and the I, diversity and inclusion. And we throw in that E, and we say DEI. But they're all three separate concepts. And the idea is that when you talk about equity, we're not talking about taking from someone to give to someone else. We're not speaking to the fact that equality is sameness. Equality is sameness. Equity is fairness, period. What I'm saying to how we're looking at equity from an operational standpoint, and I assure you that this is also conversation and agreement from the manager and from our chief equity officer, is that when we look at equity from the standpoint of governance, how do we ensure that what we're doing is allowing all our community members access to services in a way that they feel as if their quality of life is being met? It's not going to fix systemic social issues that have occurred 40, 60, 100 years ago Beyond that, that's not what we're trying to talk about. We're looking at how do we operate as a government entity in ensuring that when we create policies and procedures that are going to impact our community, that we're also thinking about communities that are not always at the table to voice concerns. So I use an example about ADA, because I think we all have to think about we have a privilege. Most of us here, I don't know everyone's ableism, but I can say that I have a privilege of ableism. I can walk, I can be able to do whatever I need to do without having any additional assistance. But when we put in those buttons, those handicap buttons to be able to open when you push a button, it was because we were trying to adhere to an ADA requirement to allow accessibility for people in wheelchairs. But in doing so, we now have allowed people who have to carry boxes in the building be able to hit a button and not have to open it. We now have allowed people with parents with strollers to be able to bring in a stroller and have accessibility into the building. We have allowed people who have any other items in their hands or accessibility issues to be able to, we've allowed people who can just normally walk in the building be able to go up a ramp and just walk in. Even though the whole purpose was to provide access for those who were handicapped and wheelchair accessible, everyone benefit from it. And that's what equity is. It's not supposed to take away from someone. It's to ensure that everyone, at the best that we can do, because it's imperfect, can benefit from our city's services. So when I walk around this building, I recognize that one thing we do not do very well is that we do not acknowledge that we have communities who are not English speaking, who operate and engage in our community, in our building. If we had signage that was in our building, if we had the abilities to have the infrastructure in our buildings, so when people walk in, be it, not just English illiterate, but how about those who have a 5th grade English illiteracy? All of those have impact, but because I'm focusing on a subpopulation, it also benefits all the other populations who interact with the city as well. So I just want to be careful when we're talking about equity, we're talking about fairness, we talk about equality, we're talking about sameness. And what I'm trying to have us talk about is how do we ensure we lower the barrier of access so all community members have access to services. I use the example of the RISE grant. It was an imperfect grant, but what it did, it was allow for us to lower the barriers for access to our granting program that ensured that we had more populations of our community participate across the city at all income levels. And so it was not a program that was geared towards one subpopulation, but by reducing the barriers that for some people have said, these are barriers for why we can never apply for grants from the city when it comes to our business grants, we remove some of those barriers and we end up getting more participation and helped many more businesses than we would have. That's equity. It has nothing to do about taking anything away from anyone else. So I just want to be clear, when you read the language in front of you, there's nothing in there that speaks to redistributing wealth or redistributing resources. It's all about ensuring access and accessibility to the resources that we currently have to all populations within the city.
You realize that's how some people do not define it, as it has evolved as a concept historically. So that's why I want to be sure I'm on the same page. And as for having a level playing field, it seems to me when we fund only a handful of agencies and leave maybe 20 out in the cold because they don't have professional grant writers, that doesn't look like a fair and level playing field to me.
And that's where we say, in that situation, how do we then look at supporting those organizations in a way that the city isn't taking on that burden, but maybe there's community partners that we could be supporting those individuals to give them those resources. So you're correct. In that situation, if we did use an equity lens, we will identify that as a barrier and be able to identify how we can then provide resources to support those individuals so they can access grants.
Because a lot of folks were left out. And that's a shame. They didn't have professional grant writers. Manager.
Councilman, could I just add one point? Because you're making a great point that I want to.
Yeah, and
just
I really
follow.
appreciate her handout.
Good. Thank you. Thank you.
It helped clarify some things.
The police department held, based upon some of the sessions that we heard, they held a grant writing session for many agencies and nonprofits that didn't get funded. So, and it was very well received. I think that, yes. Jenny in the back here from the PD was very responsive for making sure that we had that presentation. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Manager Richardson, for your explanation. I don't know how many different language signs we can put up, because Peoria is a great all-America city, and anybody who objects to that being called, Peoria being called a great all-America city, to me, is showing their ignorance. I'm wearing tonight a button intentionally. I think the manager has one. 4 different times Peoria has been awarded the All-America City Grant. America is not any race. It's not any ideology. Not any gender. It's an idea. One of the greatest ideas and experiments in the history of man. And so there might be somebody out there who doesn't like the idea of it being called an all-America city. But I think America is that shining city on a hill. And I think if the attempt here is to make it better, then I'm all for it. But I also think that we have to not get carried away and say that for 25 years or whatever before we've done this, we haven't had previous city managers and councils absolutely dedicated to everything we're talking about here, because that would be a slander on many of the people who have served in this body, in this chamber, for so many years. So I find this as a continuation of where we've been trying to go for many, many years, and I appreciate all your work. Thank you.
Councilmember Velpula.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to highlight and maybe add to Councilman Graves' question. I have to say this, the last strategic priority, the quality of life, the goal that you wrote, is exactly what I was trying to work. And Madam Mayor, you are aware of one program that we've been working on. It's called Greater Peoria Medical Education Consortium. It's mouthful. In simple words, it's middle school to medical school. So basically what we are trying to do is exactly what is reflected in this one, and I am very happy to see this coming, because what we are trying to do, there are multiple ways to do it, but because of our experience, my expertise in medical field, what we are trying to do is create a pipeline from the school districts. And then we also are trying to add this pipe to the ICC and go to Bradley and go to medical school, and it'll be branched out. But again, this is exactly how I envision, helping the medical community, retaining the people, bringing more talent. This is one of the best things that I have seen. Thank you so much for this write-up. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Welcome. Councilmember Gordon Young.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Assistant Manager Richardson, I just want to thank you. Thank you for your expertise, your leadership. Thank you for the opportunity to sit from the beginning and see all this come together and what we came up with. Phenomenal. And to include the citizens of Peoria, because that's really big to get the buy-in. But what I really can appreciate what you said today is the feedback, because this is evolving. And 50 people can look at the same thing and miss something. And so my question for you is, do we have, or is there a plan in place to continue to receive that feedback so that we can fill the gaps along the way?
So there has been initial conversation. So as we begin to look at the implementation phase of this process, if the council is amenable to it, can build into some community feedback. How typically this works is On an annual basis, we will come back to council with an annual update to the strategic plan of progress. In that, we can also build in some time, probably before that, to provide an opportunity for council or for the community to just weigh in, as well as other avenues that we can do. So another aspect of this, I would say, is if we do have the ability to go back to putting together a community survey type of document where we had a scientific led survey, that too is helpful and very more informative, I think, than having the communities look at our strategic plan. People talk about their experience, their quality of life. They look at all aspects of governance as quality of life. And so having that in place would be beneficial to give feedback, more so than just looking at a strategic plan, because as you say, it's very nuanced. And again, this is a document for the council to set priorities, but to understand that feedback from the community might be, something different.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome. Good points. Councilmember Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to applaud everyone involved in this exercise. It was very collaborative and just demonstrated great synergy from the beginning. I think we did a great job getting the unusual suspects in the room, like I always say, because often we hear that certain people aren't at the table. And so I think there was a great effort to demonstrate that in our strategic plan. I stated this yesterday when I was interviewed by WEK about this, and I felt that the plan really has 6 themes or kitchen table topics that we all can agree on that are important as we talk about taking our city into a better tomorrow. Your soliloquy on equity just now, someone who does this work as well too, and I definitely will be using that example of the ADA and the ramp, and I'll make sure I cite you, Richardson 2023, when I use that example. But no, thank you so much. We're very fortunate to have you, Assistant City Manager Richardson, and so I just want to give you your flowers publicly on this. I know that it's a team effort, but I see you shining. I definitely do. And so I'm very proud of this. I'm proud of what we have for our city. And, again, it's our North Star, and we've got more work to do, but this is a great way to move forward. So thank you.
And can I just say, I want to also acknowledge that our leadership staff, we spent 4 days on this. You all had 2 days and maybe a day and a half. Leadership spent 4 days crafting the objectives. I think we have the buy-in of our senior leadership in this work. And so that is one thing that I have to say too, is that we are all, as a part of this organization, as leadership, pretty new to the organization. And I think this exercise really allowed for us to figure out how we can break down silos a little bit more effectively by using the strategic plan as that catalyst. So this is also an opportunity to see our leadership team continue to develop and grow as a team under the leadership of our city manager.
Comments, I would ask that you please cast your ballots. Motion passes with 1 nay. Kelly. Madam Clerk?
Is there any additional unfinished business?
No.
We are now at new business.
Any new business? Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Manager, I'd like to have a report back on ordinance that we've been working on about the short-term rental. There's obviously regulations in place. We've got a lot of people that have taken advantage and are now operating under these new regulations that we have. But what I'm looking for really is ideas from our staff that could have boundaries, set some new boundaries on some of our recommendation. Example, stop maybe the number of SDR we would have on one street or in one area, because I'm getting more and more calls all the time where it's okay to have one in the neighborhood or one in the street, but we don't want 2 or 3 or 4. So I'd like to, now that we started, we can again hopefully improve. But I'd love for you to talk to your staff and have them come back with a recommendation how we can improve or short-term rental. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Councilmember Allen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to take this time to shout out the Yanni Collective for executing a beautiful event today at Bradley University. It was their annual Dig'em College and Career Fair, and we had 500 students from Peoria schools, including Limestone as well, too, that gathered at Bradley University today to visit with different college fairs and career opportunities, and then from there, they were able to attend different panel sessions and learn about how if I go to the University of Illinois and I major in engineering, and now I can go talk to a civil engineer and really just connecting that dot. And that is so important that we provide that opportunity for our young people. And so I definitely have to shout out the Yanni Collective and DeMarcus Hamilton. And then they brought in a Instagram influencer and comedian and B. Simone, and the kids just went crazy. And when you really just saw the joy and the passion and how all the dots just really connected for these young people, you know, it really just brought me joy to understand that there's so much good things that are truly happening in our city. And I know we have our challenges like every other community, but seeing that today just let me know that tomorrow is going to be a better day. And so I just want to publicly give, you know, I know a lot of people had their hands in that and supporting that, from sponsors and donors, and Bradley University trying to be intentional about bridging that gap between the city of Peoria and the university. And so kudos to their administration for allowing that. But it was a beautiful sight today. So I just want to give a shout out to DeMarcus and the Yanni Collective and everyone else involved in making that happen today.
Thank you. Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to recognize Director Doolin, Grants Manager Catherine Murphy, and Land Bank Manager Matt Smith for their work on securing the IDA grant that we approved in the consent agenda. That $712,000 is the largest grant award that IDA made to any city in this round of funding. Peoria has truly got a reputation for having a well-run grants department, and we have a track record of showing success in this regard. So I think they deserve a little recognition for that. The $712,000, as it says in the council communication, will facilitate the demolition of 65 houses. I asked Director Doolin how many houses we've demolished in the last couple of years, because we seem to have a knack for finding sources like this. He says in the last 5 years, it's probably right around 400 houses, and in the last 2 years alone, it's about 250. So I think as district councilmen, members in particular, can give them a list of a few more houses to do it, you know. So this $712,000 will go a long way in helping get rid of some of that blight and really open up the opportunities for some reinvestment in our heritage neighborhood. So thank you to the community development team for getting this grant for us.
Absolutely. Any other new business? Madam Clerk?
We are at citizens' opportunity to address the city council, and we did receive one comment card.
We have Allison Wilkinson. Is Allison still present? She's not here. Okay.
We are now at executive session.
No executive session.
We are now at adjournment.
Can I get a motion? Moved by Councilman Allen, seconded by Councilmember Sear. Please cast your ballots.
Yes, Lord.
Jackson. Cast your ballot, Jackson. Councilmember Jackson. Cast your ballot, please. Thank you for your service. She is